Good afternoon. May I request that everyone take their seats so that we can start the engagement. Firstly, the Minister and Deputy Minister have now taken the seats, and I want to say thank you to everyone for braving the really terrible weather here in Cape Town, and we have so many eminent people among us, and I'm so grateful to see all of you. It's a very important occasion. This morning, our Minister delivered a budget vote, and followed by the Deputy Minister. And when I say eminent people, may I especially welcome Minister Kubai, Deputy Minister Andre Snell, Chairperson of our Portfolio Committee, Mr. Ngola. I saw a Member of Parliament, Mr. Matafa, here as well. And our guests on the panel, we have 4 eminent guests who I will introduce in a little while. I see I see the chairperson of the Legal Aid South Africa. I see other members of our entities, the NPA, etc., present. And of course, we have some special guests, I believe some students from universities. We have some people from the department, State Attorney. We have the Acting Secretary General of the OCJ. Too many to mention, but I'm really pleased to see all of you. So welcome to this event. As indicated, the Minister delivered a budget vote speech today, and it's an opportune moment for us to now reflect on the speech and to talk about what is it about the justice system that it just generates so much of debate, and what is it about our constitution, how far have we come, and what do we have to say about it 30 years later. Our Deputy Minister is going to do the welcoming as well, and is going to provide a context and the strategic purpose of this engagement. Just by way of opening, I think we just need to reflect on our the medium-term development plan of government, where we are quite central to it. The President announced that the MTDP emphasizes a nation that works for all. We have outcome 2, which talks about reducing poverty and tackling the high cost of living, as well as outcome 3, which talks about building a capable, ethical, and developmental state. All of this, of course, colleagues, is about us giving life to our constitution, because without our constitution, our nation would not achieve a nation that works for all. And by way of a context as well, this is the 30th anniversary of the Constitution, and I would really like all of you to participate in this event, because we want to talk about and be critical, and we want to really delve into what can we do further. And if we are not critical, we will not realize those areas where we are falling short and where we need to improve, but at the same time, what have we done right that we can now improve upon and build on that foundation. So we will reflect on the impact of the Constitution in the past 30 years, and we will assess the role of civil society, and therefore we've invited all of you and our members to this committee. So let me start off the event. I may have said too much already. We would like to start off by singing the national anthem, and may I ask all of you to rise while we do that, please.
Chama sa eso, o
Thank you. Moving on to our program, I would like to introduce Deputy Minister Nell. I'm sure all of you know of Minister Nell. Minister Nell studied law at the University of Pretoria, where he was active in the anti-apartheid movement. He began his career in the Lawyers for Human Rights.
Let us fast forward.
And during 1994 and 1996, he was involved in the Constitution, in the writing of the Constitution. And hence, I believe that this introduction, which he doesn't want, is important for us to reflect on, because he was there when the Constitution was written, and he lives the Constitution every day. And without further ado, you can read his biography online. May I introduce the Deputy Minister?
Thank you very, very much, DG. I'm not sure whether I don't want... Look, there are many people's phones that I don't want, but yours in particular. Program Director, Acting Director General, Ms. Calais Pillay, my very, very dear comrade, friend and colleague, Minister Mameluko Kubai, Minister of Justice, the Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee, the Honourable Xola Ngola, Honourable Members of Parliament in general, and the Whip of the Portfolio Committee on Justice, the Honourable Oscar Matafa, also a member of the Western Cape Provincial Legislature, the Honourable Nomi Nkondlo, who I'm very, very happy is here, because we have a long, outstanding and very, very important discussion, which I hope we'll be able to take forward. Mr. Thembaletu Seisi from the University of Stellenbosch, Professor Lucas Munter from the University of the Western Cape, Dr. Zaid Kimi from the Foundation for Human Rights, Mr. Nishan Bolton from the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, the National Director of Public Prosecutions, Advocate Andy Motibi, the acting head of the Special Investigating Unit, Mr. Legeto. Are you? CFR. Members of Chapter 9 institutions, representatives of civil society and academia, but basically all our partners in justice, both present here in person as well as joining us online. You are most welcome, and we really appreciate very, very deeply your... Someone is going to be in very big trouble for not including Deputy Judge President Mbele, the chairperson of Legal Aid South Africa, on my list. That is why I hate doing this task. And let me just apologize up front for anyone who has not been recognized by name. Please accept our warmest welcome and a very firm undertaking that we will protocol you as we observe you in the course of the proceedings. But thank you so much for being here under conditions that are quite difficult. And on that note, I would like to start off just by saying that our thoughts indeed are with the many, many thousands of South Africans who are affected by these very, very adverse weather conditions, especially here in the Western Cape. Before we commence with the program, I would like to request everyone to rise and join in reciting the preamble to the Constitution of the Republic. This is a practice that we are encouraging both in government and society more broadly, because in many ways the preamble both reminds us of who we are and what we stand for, where we come from, but also very, very importantly, what we aspire to be as a nation. So, we, the people of South Africa, recognize the injustices of our past, honor those who have suffered for justice and freedom in our land, respect those who have worked to build and develop our country, and believe that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity. We therefore, through our freely elected representatives, adopt this Constitution as the supreme law of the Republic, so as to heal the divisions of the past and establish a society based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights. Lay the foundations for a democratic and open society in which government is based on the will of the people and every citizen is equally protected by law. Improve the quality of life of all citizens and free the potential of each person, and build a united and democratic South Africa, able to take its rightful place as a sovereign state in the family of nations. May God protect our people. Nkosi sikelele Afrika. Morena buluka sichaba sa Jesu. Hotsi in South Africa. God bless South Africa. Mudzimu fatuchedza Africa. Hosi katikisa Africa. Thank you. It is, as I started by saying, a practice that we have adopted as a standard practice in the department. The Acting Director General has also written to all other Directors General, requesting them, particularly last Friday, but also going forward, to make that a regular practice in their departments. The Minister is also reaching out to other ministers and departments across the three spheres of government, as well as society more broadly, to encourage that practice. And we believe it's important for a number of reasons. Firstly, the Constitution really is the executive summary, or the preamble is the executive summary of the Constitution. It encapsulates in very few, very powerful and very beautiful words the fundamental values contained in the Constitution, our objectives. So in a sense, just the reading and the reciting of that preamble is a very, very powerful lesson in civic education. And the question that we ask ourselves is that if we can arrive at the point where millions of South Africans on a daily, a weekly, a monthly basis recite that preamble, would we not, over the span of time, perhaps be a different nation? Obviously not by doing that alone. Secondly, it's important because both globally and nationally, those fundamental values of tolerance, of respect for each other's dignity, for solidarity, and for unity, unfortunately are under increasing and very strident assault. And closer to home, if we're honest with ourselves, then in many respects, the glue that keeps us together as a nation is also showing signs of loosening. As there's an increasing tendency for people to identify with a narrower identity, narrower interests, as opposed to what unites us as South Africans. So when we say in the Constitution that we are a nation united in our diversity, unfortunately, in many respects, our diversity is maybe getting more emphasis than our unity. And I think one of the things that brings us together and can bring us together as a South African nation is our Constitution and a common belief in the values contained in that Constitution. And I think for that reason, it also bears repetition and recommitment. This year marks a very defining milestone in our democratic journey. The 30th anniversary of the adoption of the Constitution by the Constitutional Assembly on the 8th of May, 1996. The Constitution is more than the supreme law of the Republic. It's a promise, a social compact founded on human dignity, equality, freedom, and justice. It recognizes the injustice of the past and at the same time exhorts us to build a society based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights. We're celebrating that anniversary under the theme, One Constitution, One Nation. Reflect, renew, recommit. So when we gather here today, we're not gathering only to celebrate, but also to reflect honestly on our progress and to recommit ourselves to the work that still needs to be done. And I think that theme is a very powerful and very relevant theme for where we are at the moment. Firstly, to say one constitution, one nation, speaks to some of the things that I referred to earlier. Because the understanding that we are one nation, governed by one constitution, is not something that we can take for granted. Secondly, there is a need to reflect, and I'll come back to that later. But I think it would also be wrong to say that having adopted a constitution, all of the challenges that we face as a society are something of the past. They're not. Neither can we claim that our 30 years journey of constitutional democracy has been without its own challenges, and in many cases very serious challenges. So we do need to reflect on those things. We must also not be shy of asking the questions whether certain aspects of our Constitution are still serving the purpose that we intended them to be at the outset of our journey. But that is a discussion that also requires very careful reflection and not populist, rhetorical, knee-jerk reactions. Secondly, we say we need to renew. And indeed, there is much that needs to be renewed, both for us personally as citizens, but also the institutions that we have created, institutions which have served us very well and which have, in many cases, done very well in protecting us from ourselves, but also those institutions have borne the brunt of very, very serious attempts during the era of state capture, and as we're seeing now, before the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee and the Madlanga Commission that have faced a direct attempt by organized crime to hollow them out and to repurpose them for other nefarious purposes. And lastly, there's a need to recommit on a daily basis to the values, to the goals of the Constitution. So that commemoration is a national civic renewal campaign, coordinated, multi-sectoral, reaffirms constitutionalism as a cornerstone of our national identity and as a living instrument for justice, equality, and development. Cabinet has adopted a program providing for a year-long whole-of-government, whole-of-society celebration. The goals are to celebrate and reaffirm constitutional values, to educate and engage citizens, especially the youth, to reflect and evaluate the performance of democracy, to promote the rule of law in everyday life, to strengthen institutional trust and accountability, to foster national unity and social cohesion, and to recommit to transformation of our society. And just like the constitution-making process itself, and just as an aside, I cut the acting DG very short, very rudely, but I was a part of the Constitutional Assembly. I was part of writing the Constitution. I know that Constitution wasn't cooked up in closed rooms, the smoke-filled rooms. We spent a lot of our time traveling the length and the breadth of the country, often flying by military planes to the remotest corners of our country, to have public engagements, much in the spirit of the Congress of the People campaign that led to the adoption of the Freedom Charter. We've received thousands upon thousands, hundreds of thousands of submissions. The Constitution itself had its foundation in documents like the Freedom Charter, which were widely consulted. So any insinuation that this is a constitution that has been imposed from elsewhere, I think is bereft of any truth and validity. And therefore, I think we need a real whole of society celebration around the 30th anniversary of the adoption of the Constitution. As I said, we need to reflect critically during that celebration, because as a result of the Constitution that has guided us, we have gradually realized socioeconomic rights which have led to rights and access to services that were denied to many, to millions. Democratic institutions have been established, unjust laws repealed, constitutional protection strengthened, but we must also confront the challenges that continue to threaten the promise of our Constitution: poverty, inequality, unemployment, corruption, and gender-based violence. Too many communities still experience inadequate access to services and justice. Our Constitution gives us a framework, but it cannot defend or enforce itself. It depends on active citizens, ethical leadership, strong institutions, and partnerships across society. And that's why this anniversary program is designed as a national civic renewal campaign. Today's roundtable is therefore more than a stakeholder engagement. It is democracy in practice. It reflects the understanding that government cannot act alone and that democracy thrives when citizens are active participants united in our diversity. So the purpose of this engagement is very clear: to reflect on the impact of the Constitution over the past 30 years, to renew our commitment to democratic values and accountable institutions, and to recommit ourselves to justice, equality, and inclusive transformation. With that, we again really welcome you, and we look forward to this engagement. I think by now you should know that it is not the style of the minister to do things quickly and once off. She is someone who has a long-term vision, and more importantly, the drive and the commitment to stick to that vision. So this is the second stakeholder engagement that is taking place around our budget debate, and I have no doubt that next year there will be another, and there have been many, many other of these stakeholder engagements. And I think also just to say, and I'm not self-appointing myself as a ministerial praise singer, but I think credit must be given where credit is due, is that I think the stakeholder engagements that we've held invariably have resulted in action and change. They have not been talking for the sake of talking. So with that, thank you very, very much, and we look forward to the engagement.
Thank you very much, Minister Nel. Our next speaker will be the chairperson of our Portfolio Committee on Justice, Honorable Nola. Our chairperson has been a member of the committee for some time. Is currently also a member of the ad hoc committee in Parliament, and he's going to speak on oversight reflections as a member of Parliament. And thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Acting DG. Allow us to extend our warm greetings to the Minister and the Deputy Minister. The NDPP, we see that your criminal role is escalating by day. The CFO of SIU, the chair of the Legal Aid Board, everyone who is here in attendance. And DM, as you say, South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity. I see that united diversity in this room. When you look at all those who have attended. So this is a true reflection of our constitutional democracy. And I think part of what, Minister, we must commend is that every time government takes a decision of how the resources of the people are going to be spent, you go and do the due consultative process that this is how your government is going to be attending to these issues with this money. Of course, sometimes it does not become enough. From what we have, we can accept even if it can be tripled because of the challenges that we're facing in the entire justice system. Requires us to have more resources than we have now. I see the chair of the Board of Legal Aid. When they were doing the APP, they brought a lot of monetary problems, which I think we understand because we must give support to those entities that are fulfilling this constitutional democracy the DM was telling us about. As the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee, we feel honored to come and stand before you to speak particularly about the ins and outs, how justice is supported by the department for the people of South Africa. We're gathered here today not merely as a formality, but as a vital exercise in every democratic accountability. The budget vote of the Department of Justice is more than just a spreadsheet of figures and allocations. It is a declaration of our priorities as a nation. It represents our commitment to the rule of law, the protection of human rights, and the unwavering pursuit of a justice system that is accessible to every person in this country, regardless of their status or means. We recognize that the department cannot operate in a vacuum. The decisions made regarding the allocation of resources from the modernization of our courts and the funding of legal aid to the critical work of the National Prosecuting Authority affect the daily lives of every citizen. You represent a cold face of justice. You see the gaps where policy meets reality. Accountability, public funds must be spent efficiently. Your scrutiny ensures that every rand is directed toward meaningful impact. A constitutional democracy is only as strong as the participation of its people. By being here, you are helping us to shape, understand the lived experiences of the people of South Africa and what challenges are they facing in relation to the dispensation of justice in South Africa. We're all aware of the hurdles we face. Our dockets are heavy. Our infrastructure requires urgent technological upgrades, and the fight against corruption remains a national imperative. However, a budget is also a tool for transformation. As a committee, we are advocating for a budget that prioritizes digital transformation, victim-centric care services, expedited justice, reducing the backlog in our courts to ensure that justice delayed does not become justice denied. So we urge you to be candid. Tell us what is working, and more importantly, tell us what is not working. Your feedback is the stress test our budget needs before it is actually finalized by Parliament. Minister and DM, we must listen carefully and candidly from what would be raised by the stakeholders here on what is their experience in relation to the services we provide as the department, so that we are able to align whatever resource allocation that we have with the needs and the will of the people. The DM recited the preamble of the Constitution. It starts with a very strong word: we, the people of South Africa. So this is a government of the people, by the people, for the people. Hence, at all material times, we remain accountable to the people of South Africa about the work we are doing on a daily basis. And we must not shy away, DM, from telling the challenges that we also face, so that our people understand the challenges that we face in serving them. We must always remain accountable. Accountability is also discipline. Thank you, Acting Teacher.
Thank you very much for that. We are going to move on to the next session, which is our roundtable discussion with civil society and academia. And please allow me to introduce our panelists. It's Prof. Munting, who is the director, and he has been at the Dalla Oma School of Law as well. He is the co-founder of the project and project coordinator of the African Criminal Justice Reform, and he's an expert on criminal matters, on child justice, prisoners' rights, preventing corruption in the prison system, and prevention and combating of torture and monitoring legislative compliance. Prof. Manting has also assisted us in the South African Law Reform Project on the criminal procedure review. May I call upon Prof. Manting to the stage, please? Our next panelist is Thembeletu Saisi. Is at the Stellenbosch University, and as young as he is, he has served in many leadership roles, and he's at the forefront of driving social justice reform in the academic field, and he is the co-founder of the Black Lawyers Association student chapter at the Stellenbosch University, and he is also director of Academic Inclusion Drive. Welcome. Our next guest is Dr. Zaid Kimi. He's the Executive Director of the Foundation for Human Rights since 2023. And this is something that all lawyers will envy. He also has a PhD in mathematics from the University of Cape Town. And he also assists. He has held very senior roles at the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, and he has a very strong commitment to human rights. Welcome, Dr. Kimi. And finally, but not least, Mr. Nishan Bolton, who's the Executive Director of the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation since its inception in 2008. You have a long history as a community and political activist for over 40 years. You also served as a city councillor and worked in the public sector. Welcome, Mr. Bolton. So, having introduced the speakers, may I call upon the first speaker to give us his reflections. And following this session, which will go on for about 45 minutes, we will have a question and answer session, and I request that you note your questions. You will have an opportunity after everyone speaks to raise your questions, and we will have a short answer session as well. So without further ado, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Minister, Deputy Minister, Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee, and everybody else who's joined us here this afternoon. Firstly, thank you very much for the invitation to make an input. It is truly appreciated. The focus of my input is, amongst other things, to highlight, as was requested, the contribution of the Dullah Omar Institute at the University of the Western Cape in engaging stakeholders to analyze pressing contemporary issues, including inequality, governance challenges, and social fragmentation, and to examine their implications for the realization of constitutional rights and freedoms. So that was the brief we were provided with. Now, I want to start off by drawing on the 15th Dullah Omar Memorial Lecture that was delivered last year by my colleague Nico Statler, and he titled his lecture, "The Legacy of Dullah Omar, the Human Rights Lawyer in the Truest Meaning of the Word." So let's unpack that a little bit. In short, Dullah was far more than South Africa's first Minister of Justice in a democratic dispensation. His legacy was that of a principled, non-partisan human rights lawyer committed to dignity, equality, and justice for all. And we can capture his approach in 7 principles. The first is universal human dignity. Human rights must protect everyone equally without political bias, guarding against both abuse and neglect of state power. Secondly, rights emerge from struggle. Human rights are not granted by the state. They are won through ongoing resistance to injustice and poor governance. Thirdly, beyond the courts, real change is driven primarily by political action, civic engagement, and civil society, with courts playing a supportive but limited role. Fourthly, rights and democracy are inseparable. Human rights and democracy depend on each other, balanced through constitutionalism and upheld by an independent but restrained judiciary. Fifthly, focus on socio-economic justice. In unequal societies like ours, human rights work must prioritize access to basic needs, such as housing, healthcare, education, and safety, along civil liberties. 6, accountability and no impunity. Ensuring justice requires holding violators accountable, both nationally and globally. And 7, humanity and humility in practice. A true human rights lawyer serves others with humility, motivated by justice rather than personal recognition. So in essence, Dala's legacy defines human rights lawyering as ethical, socially engaged, politically aware, and deeply grounded in the lived realities of the people it serves. Reflecting his legacy over the 30 years of its existence, the Institute, which now bears Dala's name, has carried out work which seeks the realization of rights. From the early years of assisting in the drafting of the Constitution, the supporting precedent-setting litigation, either as experts or as amicus, included the Grootboom decision, the Treatment Action Campaign, and Social Justice Coalition decisions, to advance legislative reform campaigns, including that of the Child Justice Act and the criminalization of torture. And presently, the Institute is actively involved in the current review of the White Paper on Local Government and is part, as the DG mentioned, a working committee of the Law Reform Commission looking at the review of the Criminal Procedure Act. As the Institute, we are also founding members of the Prosecutions Project, a coalition which is seeking changes to the law providing for the National Prosecuting Authority. We as the Dalai Lama Institute are convinced that we are in a precarious situation which urgently requires such legislative reform, and I will elaborate on this below. Just more than 30 years into democracy, we find ourselves in a precarious situation. Corruption is rife. The number of murders has doubled in 15 years. Local government is in crisis, and more than half of South Africans are not in employment. At the core of this crisis is the decline in quality of governance and the rule of law, reflected in the major international justice and governance indicators of the World Justice Project and the World Bank. Thus, it is appropriate to reflect on governance. In politics and governance, real strength lies in how power is used. Strong institutions do not simply react to events. They act with purpose. They draw their authority from competence, integrity, and a clear sense of responsibility, not from slogans, excuses, or public pressure. Such institutions are willing to account for their actions. They do not see accountability as a burden forced upon them, but as part of what it means to exercise power responsibly. They are open to scrutiny, reform, and transparency, not because they are weak, but because they are confident in their role and committed to doing better. They set standards, keep promises, and when they fail, they take responsibility and work to correct it. By contrast, weak institutions operate on the defensive. They respond to crises rather than shaping outcomes. Instead of demonstrating capability, they rely on moral arguments, claims of victimhood, or appeals to history to justify their shortcomings. Over time, weak systems meant to serve the public become focused on protecting themselves. Accountability is dismissed as an unfair attack, and the lack of consequences becomes normal, even accepted. In this environment, weakness is often reframed as virtue, and avoiding responsibility is mistaken for strength. Institutions become more concerned with explaining themselves than improving themselves. They survive through justification rather than performance, and in doing so, they lose the very qualities that make governance effective and legitimate. Lack of accountability lies at the heart of deteriorating governance. Among the founding values in Section 1 of our Constitution is the rule of law and accountability. In Section 195, 1F of the Constitution, we read, the public administration must be accountable. Unfortunately, it has been the case for some time that impunity for criminal wrongdoing, including by institutional actors, prevails. And it is this widespread impunity that has eroded trust in many of our institutions. The South African police perhaps provide the best example, with the internal disciplining and prosecution of police officials for rights violations being extremely rare. We need to rethink accountability, not only as a constitutional value, but how it finds practical and tangible expression. As Hugh Corder and other constitutional lawyers have explained, accountability requires more than an explanation or justification. It entails that those exercising power account for their decisions against defined criteria. They make amends for fault or error and take steps to prevent recurrence. In a constitutional democracy, this presupposes that the administration or executive is checked meaningfully by an organ of government distinct from it. In the overall accountability architecture of our Constitution, the National Prosecuting Authority occupies a unique position. It is the only state entity with a mandate to institute criminal prosecutions. The wording of Section 179 of the Constitution is not particularly specific about the institutional framework of the NPA, and this is a symptom of the drafting history. However, it demands in Section 179(4) that national legislation must ensure that the prosecuting authority exercises its functions without fear, favor, or prejudice. The National Prosecuting Authority Act, as drafted and passed in 1998, does not do this. There are at least three fundamental concerns with its provisions. Firstly, the appointment and removal of not only the National Director, but also the 4 Deputy National Directors and 10 Directors of Public Prosecutions in the divisions of the High Court is centralized in the hands of the President, without provisions for an open, transparent, merit-based process. This is open to abuse and has had some adverse consequences, particularly as all of these appointees, save the National Director, serve indeterminate terms in office up to the age of 65 years and may thus serve for decades. Removing a poorly performing Director of Public Prosecution is extremely difficult in terms of the current provisions. Secondly, the NPA and its leadership have no control over their purse, as the NPA is a program in the Department of Justice's budget. It remains financially and administratively dependent on the department. The accounting officer is the DG of Justice and not the National Director or CEO in the NPA. This becomes particularly crucial when the NPA seeks to hire in external expertise, such as forensic accountants or litigation specialists, as the NPA Act allows this only in limited circumstances via a process which also requires ministerial approval. Third, the NPA does not account independently for performance and strategic direction, and there is in law no provision for public engagement or professional oversight. There is also in law no relationship between the National Prosecuting Authority and the provinces, yet this relationship exists between SAPS and the provinces. The highly centralized nature of the NPA does not speak to the needs at ground level. By concluding, in the short to medium term, accountability as a constitutional obligation must be confronted directly, and crucially, it must be made visible. Without visible accountability, the promise of the Constitution is hollow, and trust in public institutions will continue to erode. Restoring accountability requires more than statements of intent. It requires institutions that are willing and able to act consistently, fairly, and without fear or favor. In this regard, reforming the NPA Act is pivotal. If the NPA functions effectively and independently, it can serve as a catalyst for broader institutional renewal. It can demonstrate in practice that the law is not symbolic but enforceable, that power is not immune from consequence, and that those who abuse public office will be held to account. This is particularly important in a society marked by deep inequality. When accountability fails, it is the poorest and most vulnerable who bear the greatest cost. When accountability works, it affirms their dignity and restores faith in the rule of law. Ultimately, the question is not only whether we have the right laws, but whether we have the institutional will to enforce them. Strong institutions do not fear accountability, they embody it. And it is through such institutions that the constitutional promise of justice can be made real. Thank you very much.
That's a hard act to follow. Greetings, colleagues, all protocol observed, but special greetings to Minister Mamuluko. The last time we were together, we were literally putting out fires in Stellenbosch, in Kayamandi. So thank you for this great privilege. And the opportunity to contemplate where we come from, where we are now, and where we can go and where we can be. The South African Constitution occupies a peculiar place in global constitutionalism. It is celebrated internationally as this globally progressive constitution, yet internally it is contested and debated by scholars, activists, and critical thinkers alike, who argue that it perpetuates rather than transform the fundamental injustices of apartheid and colonialism. This is where we find ourselves today. As South Africa marks 3 decades since the adoption of this foundational document, the disjuncture between the promise and the lived reality has become increasingly visible. It is something we can no longer ignore, particularly if you're in the Western Cape on a day like this. The Deputy Minister earlier on urged us to recite the preamble. And in that preamble, there's a promise of social justice. Writing the Grootboom judgment in the year 2000, Justice Yaqub said, and I quote, "The people of South Africa are committed to the attainment of social justice and the improvement of the quality of life for everyone." Close quote. What then is this promise that Yaqub thinks we are all committed to? If you look at the genesis of the concept social justice as coined by Luigi Tabarelli in the 19th century, he defined social justice as justice between man and man, which therefore should level them to the rights given with their humanity. Later on, this very same term was publicized by Antonio Rosmini, who also equated social justice as the complete common good that aims at social harmony by balancing the equal rights and dignity of the human person with the inequalities inherent in the social nature of man. If we come back to South Africa, scholars like Madlingos and Madonsela anchor social justice in distribution. The distribution of resources as reflected in the fair and equitable distribution of resources, opportunities, burdens, and privileges in a society. 3 decades later, are our resources, burdens, and opportunities distributed fairly and equally amongst us? If you are a young queer man like myself, if you are a black woman in this country, if you are a homeless person in this country, does the promise of social justice stand true for you? Or does it remain a hollow promise? But whose fault is it? Whose fault is it that we find ourselves 3 decades later as the most unequal society in the world? I know you want me to say government's fault. Yes, partly. But the Constitution does not put everything on government alone. Section 8.2 of the Constitution binds you and I. The vertical and horizontal application, as you find in Section 8.2 of the Constitution, binds citizens and government alike. The achievement of this great Constitution will not be on government alone. It rests on us too. As we look ahead to the next 30 years, the question to ask is, what are you and I doing to make this Constitution a lived reality? In the small corners we occupy, in the positions that we occupy, in the influence that we can make to make a difference, the Constitution enjoins us to do so. Because this Constitution is the very same Constitution that allowed in 2006 for the court to say same-sex couples can be married in South Africa. It is this very same Constitution that allows the court to be able to tell the head of state that you have acted unconstitutional and in breach of your office. It is this very same Constitution that allows black women, in the Bear case, to be able to inherit from their fathers and from their brothers. If you didn't know, before this Constitution, black women could not inherit from their fathers or their brothers. It is this very same Constitution that allowed a student in KZN to be able to wear their religious jewelry to school in the Pillay case. So yes, it is not the perfect or the most perfect Constitution in the world, but it deserves the honor that we are giving it today. It deserves our allegiance. It deserves our critique too. But most of all, it deserves us to put our hands and say, I will work for this Constitution and for the attainment of social justice. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Now there are 2 difficult acts to follow. I think I'll bring down the tone a little bit, so give Mr. Bolton an easier wicket to play on. Thanks again, all protocol observed, and thank you very much for the invitation to speak. I know that we often find ourselves, speaking as the foundation and, various government departments, we find ourselves on opposite sides of issues. Sometimes face to face, but very often we have our lawyers doing the fighting for us. But nevertheless, while those are disagreements, I don't have any doubt that we all share a common goal. Our priorities may differ at times, our methods may differ, but the common goal of creating a more just and fair society is something I'm absolutely convinced we all share. And I'm sure that I speak for myself and my organization, but I speak for, I'm sure, for much of civil society. That government is sometimes an opponent, but very often a partner, and in principle, a partner for what we want to achieve. I'm going to take a slightly different tack to my colleagues. I wanted to start off by just saying that, and something I'll return to at the end, that this just society that we want to build, although we venerate the Constitution and we built on a society of laws, that Constitution, I think as the Deputy Minister has pointed out, is an expression of the people's wills and the people's wishes. And when the people's will and wishes start to change, or when the values that underpin our society start to change, the Constitution will not save us. It will simply be a document and a set of laws that can be overcome. And so while we venerate the Constitution, I'm going to ask that we come back to some of the issues that the Deputy Minister raised about the underlying values that gave rise to that Constitution and how we get back and protect those values, whether or not they are codified. This question of what access to justice means, and we're all aware that the justice system is a hugely complicated system, many pieces. The courts, the legal system, Legal Aid South Africa, the judges themselves, the laws we make, the application of those laws, and the NPA. One important part of access to justice is civil society itself. Sometimes in the form of organizations like my own, the Foundation for Human Rights, sometimes in the form of small community-based organizations operating on little to no resources that provide the interfaces that make up government, that make up business. And without those institutions, the ability of ordinary people to access justice is undermined. No matter how good your court system, no matter how well trained your lawyers are, it's simply a fact of life that for many ordinary people, their first interaction with the laws of this country, with the systems of this country, are going to be with low-level bureaucrats at their municipality, at their local police station, at the local court. And for that, civil society plays a key role in facilitating and improving those interactions. The question of impunity that Lucas mentioned is, of course, an important one. It's something that we can see at a systemic level. It becomes obvious when we look at those big picture numbers of crimes that are prosecuted, the number of prosecutions that happen, particularly with respect to serious crimes like murder, gender-based sexual crimes. But I want to also point out that the effect of those failures for ordinary people is very real. When they see their family members, their neighbors, their friends having their rights violated, and the system itself does not respond. The system does not attempt to prosecute or investigate those responsible. Their reaction is, of course, one of disappointment, but also one of a lack of faith in the system itself. A lack of faith, that means you're less likely to lay a charge, you're less likely to trust the police, and that failure is something that builds on itself. And while we may convince ourselves at some macro level that everything's fine, that sort of failure undermines the values that gave rise to our Constitution. If people no longer believe that the systems in place will provide them with justice, and I'm not talking about justice in the sense of prosecutions or you always win every case, but they believe if they have a rights dispute, that the system will attempt to hear them and adjudicate on that rights dispute. That's the important thing. Not that they have their rights vindicated, but that the system allows them to be heard. If that fails, their faith in the system fails, and inevitably the system itself will fail. No system of laws is proof against the lack of will of the people itself. You may want to convince yourself otherwise, but that is simply not the case. I also want to make a particular point when we talk about particular vulnerable and marginalized groups that are targeted within society, because they are easy targets for whatever is going wrong. Our own failure to deliver services, our failure to access justice, our failure to achieve socioeconomic rights. That they are vulnerable and marginalized groups that are easy targets because they have less access to rights, they have less political power. Today, it is those who are undocumented. Tomorrow, it is those who have a different sexual orientation. And the day after, it's those who may believe differently from us and some religious values. Our imperative to protect the rights of the vulnerable and marginalized is both a moral one, because we believe in justice for all, not justice for the powerful or justice for those who matter, but justice for all. So there's a moral imperative when people's rights are being violated to speak up. But of course, there's also a systemic imperative, because if you fail to speak up today for the rights of someone who's not strong enough to speak up for themselves, and then you do the same thing tomorrow, one day it will be your turn. And as pleasant as that may be, they'll come for you, and you will have no one to speak up because you've turned your head away from everyone else. So there's a question about, I think, what should the Department of Justice be doing? And I know that there are very many things you have to do. The very many things you have to spend your money on day to day. The very bits and pieces of keeping the system of justice operational is a complex, expensive, time-consuming task. But I'm also, I think, going to ask the Department of Justice, while you're keeping the lights on in the justice system as it is, to start thinking about the justice system as it should be. To start taking into your confidence the civil society organizations, whether they operate like ours or whether they operate at a local level, to treat them as partners in conceptualizing what that justice system must be. Because if we don't do that, if we just keep the lights on, then eventually the lights will fail. And then finally, this question of values is an important one. We've talked about, I think, the Madlanga Commission, the fact that the values that we see people pursue, the values with which we're bombarded by our media, the values of accumulation and consumption, of excess wealth, of that being what makes you a good person. Those values, there's a battle on for the hearts and minds of people. And it's a battle in which, I think, if I say boldly, the forces of good are hugely outnumbered. And the department, I would say, also needs to go back to some of its motivating principles in the the mid-1990s, the early 2000s, to fight the battle of values. It's not someone else's battle. It's not the Department of Sport, Art and Culture's battle or some other department. It is the Department of Justice's battle to make sure that the values that gave rise to our Constitution have a fighting chance of enduring. If we sit back and simply allow values to be dictated largely by Western media ideals of what it means to be a good and successful person, we will end up where we talk about Brazilian butt lifts and blue light parades to get the kids to school, and taking showers in hotels when people run out of water. Those are the values that are antithetical to our Constitution, but they need support. They're not going to, by some miracle, spring up in our people and endure. And if we're committed to a just and fair society, then I think we must commit to fighting that fight as well, as we fight to keep the lights on. Thank you.
Greetings, everybody. In fact, I shouldn't say anything. I should just sit down now. But then there might be wasteful and what's it called? Fruitless and wasteful expenditure. Minister, greetings and greetings to everybody. And like the Deputy Minister was saying, I also don't want to sing your praises. But our last encounter with you was very different from many of your colleagues who hold the same seniority in government. You came to Sharpeville when we did our annual commemoration in Sharpeville. And what I didn't see was an entourage of blue lights. I didn't see it from you, and neither did I see it from your Deputy Minister a year before. And let me tell you why that's important. You see, this preamble that we were asked to read, and this Constitution, nobody believes it. Because those who are expected to provide the leadership that makes us believe in it don't match the requirements. They don't. When a deputy president can drive the wrong way up a freeway in Midrand and his entourage endangers oncoming traffic, what does it say about his level of equality with everybody else who obeys the rule of the law? It doesn't. When his bodyguards can beat up people on the road because they didn't give way in time, what does it say about equality? And it's that is the missing ingredient. It's the leadership that is meant to make people believe that the text of this document is worth believing in it. And that is a theme I want to come back to. But Minister, you and your deputy, and there are a few others who go without the trappings of office, and long may that continue. South Africa is a different place today compared to pre-1990 and 1994. It is a vastly different country. Those who argue that apartheid was better and so forth can't back it up with evidence. But we are also not where we should be or where we could have been. And that's the big test. Sometimes we want to compare what we have today with what came before. But that would be the wrong measure. Is where could we have been if we were doing the basics right in this country? And that's what we all have to answer for. Now let me give you one example. I'm here today. I had huge qualms about coming here because I didn't know what is this thing costing the department? Why are we gathering at the Cape Sun? How much does this entire thing cost? We go around to communities and we say to them, when you do accountability work, ask the government officials there, how much did this library cost? Be transparent about that cost. Tell us who got the contract. Tell us what are the details of all of that. I think it would be so good, even for an event like this, to have started off, to have said, we're gathering you here today, this is what it costs. And we guarantee you that we have complied with all the supply chain management requirements, so that as you sit here, you are not guilty to some wrongdoing that might be uncovered later by the Auditor General. Because it's very possible. It's very, very possible. But it's that basic guarantee that we need to think about, not reciting the preamble, but is giving a guarantee that when government hosts an event, it has met all of the basic supply chain management requirements to the full extent of the law. I don't know if the CFO can do that here now, but I would like to know that, at least when I leave, that I have that assurance. My second discomfort here today was when I came in, I was asked to sign a registration form that asked me what's my race. And perhaps more insulting, it asked me what was my age. And I have no idea what you want to do with that information. As the guardians of the Constitution and as promoters of building a nation, I need to know why you want this information. Why do you want me to reclassify myself here today? What is the purpose of that? Why do you have male and female? And there's a whole range of other possibilities that goes there. So in a small way, the bits and pieces that you do must also think about what needs to change. You must reflect the change. And it starts with the very small things. I like that we started off with the preamble. But there's a question that bothers me. What is the behavior required of cabinet ministers to live this preamble? I'm happy that the ministry is talking about a national civic renewal program. I shudder to think about when a minister in this cabinet goes and he said, Amahambe, as part of that national civic renewal program, what happens? How is it that in a cabinet today, there is a minister that is outrightly xenophobic? How does that get tolerated? What are his colleagues doing about his xenophobia? What does this department do about it? When do you raise your voices about those that you sit with and say and do the wrong things? So we can't gather here and praise a constitution and be happy about 30 years when yesterday or a few weeks ago, when we needed to say something, we said nothing. And not about abstract things, about stuff that we are championing. So, I like that there's a civic renewal program. But I think it must be more than just reciting a preamble. Reciting a preamble and getting people to do that in huge numbers and so forth, without thinking about the values and the behavior that must enforce it, I think is a waste of time, frankly. So, the NPA issue has been covered. Zayed has covered the rise of conservative values. The rise of conservative values across the world today is perhaps our biggest challenge. And it is those conservative values that get some people to talk about South Africa or parts of South Africa breaking away and forming ethno-states and different states, because they think that the Constitution allows them freedom of speech to say all of these things, and it goes unchallenged. But let me tell you what's happening in the US today. Because conservatism and right-wing values become so entrenched, there's a growing trend amongst women in the Republican Party and beyond who think that and are advocating for women not to have the right to vote in significant numbers. They are advocating that their role is to be at home, make babies, stay in the kitchen, because the white population is dwindling in the US. Something unthinkable. How will it manifest in our country? How will it challenge the values of this Constitution in weeks, years to come? Watch the growth in support for the idea of a death penalty. It's already there. The murmurings are there. The sentiment is there. So beyond immigration and issues of foreign migrants in the country, the next push is going to be on the death penalty. 2029 election, it will become a big issue. And because it will be so widespread, it becomes an electoral issue that will bring people into power. Because today you take over a country not in an undemocratic way. You use democracy to gain power to then behave in the most undemocratic way. And this issue will get them there. How do we counter this? We don't counter it by saying the death penalty is wrong and we just recite the past. You have to have more coherent arguments to counter the rise of conservatism. And I think that it requires more than reciting the Constitution. This Constitution requires a different kind of leadership, a leadership that rebuilds trust at the most basic level. Because when more than 60% of South Africans say, we don't trust this democracy, we don't want to vote, in fact, give us a strong leader tomorrow and we will follow him or her. And that strong leader will talk about Abahambe, it will talk about the death penalty, it will talk about women being in the kitchen, and they will talk about gays, lesbians, and so forth being secondary citizens, people with disabilities not being entitled to all kinds of rights. That's the challenge that we face in our constitutional democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to our four panelists. There is much food for thought in all of your inputs that you made today. We are running slightly earlier in our schedule, so it means it gives us more time for questions and answers. And I think we will take about 4 or 5 questions at a time. And then we will give the panel an opportunity to respond. I am tempted to do a short summary of what each speaker spoke about, but I don't want to infuse my thoughts on the matter, so let me hear from you in terms of your questions. And I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hands, 8, 9. So may I ask the officials on the floor to just note where the mic will flow through.
Mics. We've got mics on the table. Yeah.
All right, so let's take this end of the table of the room first, and we'll move on to this side.
Thank you very much. My name is Wendy Pakir. I'm from Ubuntu Rural Women and Youth Movement. former farm worker and former trade unionist. Thank you very much for the panel and also for the invitation to be in this space. And I've listened to everybody, and I sit here and I read a little bit the Constitution just to remind myself again of what the Constitution says. And something I really want to bring to this space is the issue of digitalization at the Labour Court, because this very department have jurisdiction over the Labour Court. And the challenges it poses for ordinary people who do not belong to trade unions to get their matters heard at the Labour Court. Now, coming from the union and now working for an advice office, we would help people to get their things to the Labour Court, founding affidavits, notions of motions, and all these things. But there's a lot of challenges with this issue, and I think that's something that this department must review. The second issue is on what Mr. Thembaletu was saying. He spoke about the promise of social justice. Now, I want to expand that a little bit. And I want to speak about the issue of women and girls, rural women, the issue of safety and violence, and the fact that it's affecting women and girls across class, race, and gender. I'm not saying it's not affecting boys, it do, but women and girls are affected more. And when I looked at section, I think it's 35 of the Constitution, that speaks about arrested, detained, and accused persons. And I found it to be one of the longest chapters in the Constitution. And I was quickly just glancing through, now where's the protection of us to feel safe wherever you walk at night, and wherever you go to feel that you are safe in the land of your birth. And I found section 9 that speaks about the equality, that everyone is equal before the law, and equal protection, and freedom of security of the person, which includes the right to be free from all forms of violence from either public or private sources. Now it leads me to my question, and maybe we need to think about having a constitutional amendment. Why is section 35 of the Constitution one of the longest chapters in the Constitution that gives so much rights to the perpetrators? And us monitoring courts, doing gender-based violence cases, being on the cold face of gender-based violence, where women are murdered daily, every 8 hours, they say, killed by an intimate partner. Not somebody randomly on the street, but somebody you know, somebody that you're in an intimate relationship with. The stats that's been released every quarter of how many women murders, how many children murdered, how many children murdered. The extreme violence, the extreme bodily harm, you know, with the intention to do extreme harm to women and girls and so forth. But even the right to life, it's just a short little writing there under the chapter. It doesn't say a lot. Now, isn't that a contradiction? Because if perpetrators have so much rights in the Constitution, and I can understand a little bit why there's such a long right, because maybe under apartheid a lot of people were detained, and they were unlawfully and unjustly. But we're in a new dispensation, in a new democracy. The right of the perpetrator cannot be more of the right of the victim or the survivor. There's something fundamentally wrong here. And that's why I say we need to review that clause. What does it mean? You go to court 3 years for an intimate femicide case. Justice for Rusen Kailawak, stabbed 32 times by the father of a child. A daughter who's afraid of tomato sauce because all she remembers the blood, raised by her grandmother today. 3 years in Blue Downs Regional Court. And then after 3 years, he says, I'm willing to take a plea deal. Not really acknowledging that what he did was wrong, depriving her of life, with a whole future ahead of her. He was only 28 years old. Now that's the kind of things I talk about, or I want to put into this space. Because it is right, as you say, justice delayed, it is justice denied. The trauma, already the trauma of losing a daughter, The trauma of a young child losing a mother and then having to sit in court for 3 years. I don't know if it's a backlog of the court or what the problem is. And then even if the guy came and claimed that he's mentally unstable, and then the next time he want a new attorney and a new that and a new that, and then he just get away, wasting the court's time.
So thank
And
you very
things like
much.
that. I'm going to stop there, but that's what I put here. We don't get the chance to put these things into spaces like this with the minister or the portfolio chair of influential people like this, the advocates, the lawyers, the NPA. So if this is the only opportunity I get, it's to leave that thought with you, and we must have conversations about it. Go back to the drawing board and review Section 35 of the Constitution. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't mean to cut anyone short, but I do want you to restrict yourself to one question. And the first speaker has raised very interesting questions on why are the rights of perpetrators in the Constitution so well defined as opposed to other rights. And the first part of the question was, of course, on access to the labor court. So may I take the other questions from that corner? There were other people on that side of the room.
Can I go?
Yes, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Edwin Cleophas. I represent the Social Justice Agency. A few points leading to a question. Firstly, well done to the department on providing a very representative panel here today. We keep speaking about these things and we keep on finding the same voices getting to be placed on center stage. When a room of people calls out the preamble, that doesn't mean justice is served amongst our people. It even sounded like the people didn't believe what they were reading, our Deputy Minister. So I know it sounds cool and it looks cool, but if it doesn't affect the people in the community, it's basically worthless. Just to say, our Constitution keep on being introduced as the supreme document, as if we cannot speak about it being changed. We have to think about these things. Like the Bible, it was written for a specific time, place, and people. And when you interpret it for it today, it doesn't always make sense. When we look at our brothers and sisters that are being denied currently, with the Mark Lottering case being preached, or singing in the church is now illegal for gay people, if you follow the news. Just on that point, Minister, we started out in the fight against apartheid. We said we're going to be a society without racism. And then the ANC, as our black government that came into power, kept all those classifications. And that's why we cannot get rid of these things. Today we still speak about non-racialism. Non-racialism for white people is a cop-out to face the racism that they continue to still today force onto black people in this country. Therefore, we continuously call for an anti-racist society. Now, if we need that and we want that, we have to be able to change the Constitution. It cannot be a supreme document. Supremacy has to end. And then finally, we keep on talking about this democracy. Democracy is killing the revolution. Because we tell our people that a vote is going to change something. This is why the people don't vote, because they've been voting and they're still deeply in shit today. No jobs, no food, no nothing. But we keep on preaching democracy works. Who said that? The colonizers. And finally, one of the speakers said earlier that this constitution was well developed, researched, and it's underpinned by the Freedom Charter that was adopted in 1955. Let me say something about that. In 1955, in this country, black people hated white people, hated, severe hate. And you are meaning to tell me that they wrote a document that said, this country belongs to all in it, black and white, and we love everybody and each other. Come now. If we are serious about changing this country, we have to start thinking about changing the documents that keep on oppressing our people. Because this document, while it was good for that specific time, it is still killing our people today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions at the table?
Donna.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. The first thing I would like to say, I'm very excited to see young people because a lot of the times the young people are very excluded in these spaces because apparently we don't have the power to speak, so that's really cool. Also, shout outs to Dr. Metz, PhD. Your speech was quite amazing. Just want to piggyback on the GPV and on the Constitution. For starters, I believe that co-creation should happen from the ground up and not from upwards going downwards. So if you're going to be creating a Constitution, you need to go to the people who the Constitution is going to serve. What are their struggle? What is it they're going through? And how do they see the government, the Constitution, and the people in power helping them so that they can have a dignified life if we're speaking about equal rights to everyone? Because I'm pretty sure we can sit here and agree that we don't all have equal rights, just speaking in Cape Town. Another thing that I also want to say is I like the fact that the people were speaking about what can be done to change and all of that. I would have loved to hear anything about the tech innovation and tech adoption so that technology can somehow bridge the gap into the justice system, into some of the issues and the struggles that the people and the communities that we serve and work with as civil society. Also, another thing that I would like to raise, I think it's very important that if there are organizations, civil societies, or people that are already in the tech space that are trying to bridge the gap so that marginalized communities and people who feel like that their voices are not heard be given an opportunity to be in spaces where those tech innovations can then be put into the department and also be able and accessible for the people. With that being said, please follow Gender Rights in Tech to find out about the work that we're doing. We are co-creating, especially with gender-based violence, where we have our own AI chatbot that speaks on mental health and help people. We also have a panic button that helps people who don't and can't afford private security, so that in a case of a gender-based violence issue, you're able to press the panic button and someone can get assistance. Because at the end of the day, we can sit here and speak about all the things, but if people aren't aware about the work that we're doing, then the people that we're serving aren't able to get the help that we need. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Karen Reese, and I'm here representing Mosaic Training Service and Healing Center. It's an organization based in the Western Cape, but we do work in Gauteng and KZN as well. And the main area of work we do is around domestic violence and sexual violence, partnering with the Department of Justice to offer domestic violence survivor-centered services in court. And I want to piggyback a little bit about on what Dr. Kemi mentioned around how do we make sure that the services that are provided within the justice system are actually crafted together with civil society organizations? I think we're doing a lot of work, and Minister, I'd like to draw on your budget vote speech from today, where there was commitment to increasing the number of sexual offences courts in this financial year, increasing the number of courts that are aligned with the minimum norms and standards for domestic violence, as well as increasing the number of Tutuzela Care Centre facilities. What I would like to ask is, it's great to increase justice or access to justice in the way that we've traditionally done, but I want to put a challenge out there to say we need to reimagine what these systems look like based on what survivors and complainants actually need the justice system to do. Currently, we have sexual offense cases. Some of them can take up to 5 to 7 years to finalize. And in that time, a complainant withdraws the matter and are then blamed for attrition. And so we've got to start reimagining what is it that complainants are wanting to get out of the system. And I suppose my question would be, both to the panel and the decision makers in the room, are we willing to reimagine the system? Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to refer the questions to the panel, and perhaps to people from the department and other organizations who may be able to answer. I think the first question on Section 35 of the Constitution, Prof. Manting, I'd like you to answer that question. And on the issue of digitalization in the courts and also with the use of tech, I think that has come up twice. If any of you would be willing to raise that, to deal with that. So please, Prof, if you would like to take the first question.
Yeah, let me. That audible? Is it working?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Let me briefly reflect on Section 35, and I must also disclose here that long ago, in a previous position, we took the government to court to secure the right for prisoners to vote, and that's Minister of Home Affairs versus Nicro. At the time, I was working there. So the question of prisoners' rights and the rights of those deprived of their liberty is of central importance to our history. And when the state intervenes in such a way that it deprives people of their liberty, the risk of abuse is so immense, and the risk of torture. And we know this. We don't. It's not a wishful think or a fantasy. When I was to only look at the annual reports of the Independent Police Investigating Directorate, and you see literally hundreds of cases of torture still being recorded. So we must never think that Section 35 has become superfluous or that we shouldn't be serious about it. But I think the question that you raise remains a vitally important one, in that where do victims fall in this? Why are victims seemingly neglected in the Constitution? And it's not a new issue. It's been around for a very long time. And the question then for me becomes is, can we fix the problem you are identifying so accurately of how victims are treated in the criminal justice system? Can we fix that in the Constitution? And what would such a fix look like? Or should it not rather be fixed in how we implement services and how the state accounts for implementing services? I mean, these stories that people wait 5 years, 7 years for cases to be finalized, they are not new. They've been coming on for years. My question then to you is, okay, what would you like to fix in the Constitution that would fix that problem? And my suspicion is it won't be fixable in the Constitution. We need to look at how the state is performing on a day-to-day basis. And we can keep on making plans and strategies, but sooner or later you actually have to start doing the work. And that means that people must have a positive experience of the criminal justice system for each and every person, that they be informed of where their cases are, that the prosecutors know the law. These are basic things that we are struggling with to implement at the moment. And then my other comment was on, Kerry asked essentially about needs-based services. And I think there is so much research evidence out there that tells us what people want from the system. This is not a mystery. The question is, are we listening to the evidence? Are we taking the evidence on board? And are we developing evidence-based policy and practice and procedures? And I fear the answer is no. We are not taking the evidence seriously. Thank you.
Okay, may I ask the rest of the panel to give their reflections on the questions that were raised or comments made?
All right, thank you. Thank you. I do want to start with Ms. Wendy, and you had alluded to this. If you look at the Constitution, I said when we were in Pretoria DM, that you can trace the DNA of the Constitution as a direct response to apartheid. Section 35 is such an example. Section 12, the freedom and movement is also such an example. But of course, to fortify Prof's view, the Constitutional Court in Kamishal said the Constitution is not the problem. It was a case of gender-based violence where the police had released the guy on bail and the prosecutors decided not to prosecute. The Constitutional Court there held that the state, the criminal justice system, the prosecutors are the problem because they had a positive duty to protect Kamishal from the perpetrator. So it might just be, as Prof says, that it is in the implementation gap rather than the Constitution. To come back to my fellow young person who was so excited that they forgot to introduce themselves, but I've got your organization, Genderizing Tech. We've found at the Center for Social Justice that even before we start talking about the implementation of laws, there's something that we are missing. We are missing the certification of the law. Is this law that is this bill or law going to achieve the dreams in the preamble? So we've got a tech that we're trying to build up, and perhaps we can work together on this in a black box, to say policymakers should have a virtual simulation of the law and ask questions, is this policy, law, or program going to achieve the social justice that the preamble talks about? Is it bringing us closer to the freeing of everyone's potential? Is it going to help us with gender-based violence? Instead of getting through Parliament, then later on wanting to mitigate the unintended consequences. Because sometimes it's unintended. You say you want to achieve this, but in the achievement of that, you're actually causing or backsliding from the constitutional commitment. And technology can play a great role in that.
All right, thank you. Just one more comment on victims' rights. I don't think it's necessarily a constitutional issue. There are other domains where victims have greater involvement in the prosecution, and there are examples we can learn from, but we have to be aware that it's a double-edged sword. You know, having the state as the sole prosecutor of crimes, and serious crimes in particular, serves a particular purpose, and allowing victims a role in that process. While it may improve the prosecution in some cases, it can also have adverse consequences. But I think that's something that should be examined in more detail. I think with respect to what those, I think the constitutional values, you know, I think our immediate frustrations and the failures of the state can lead one to ask for radical solutions, you know, that whatever we have must be tossed out. And in many cases, I think your boss, Prof. Madansela, has made the analogy that we want to throw away this complicated iPhone without knowing how it works because someone has promised us a better phone somewhere else. We have to apply the Constitution. We have to find out how it works. We have to make it work for us before we throw in the towel and ask for something new and maybe not better. I think the warning that there are going to be people out there who are going to offer quick and easy solutions to social problems, and those quick and easy solutions are going to pave the road to hell. Thank you.
No, the Constitution doesn't implement itself, and that's the reality. To argue that 1955, that black people hated white people, is, I mean, I would certainly love to see the empirical evidence for that.
There's many videos on social media.
When the Freedom Charter talks about South Africa belongs to all who live in it, drafted in 1955, a few years, 7 years after the coming into of apartheid, it was a reclamation that black people had a place in this country and a completely different context within which it made the argument that everybody had a place in this country, irrespective of their race. So to misconstrue that preamble of the Freedom Charter in a very narrow way today, I think is just wrong. However, the challenge today, again, non-racialism is an aspiration. At the core of it is an anti-racist society. The DOJ has been trying to coordinate South Africa's National Action Plan against racism. One of it has succeeded in some ways, but it's perhaps one of the most under-resourced areas of its work. Not because of its own weaknesses, but simply because the rest of government doesn't see it as a priority. There's monthly meetings of that forum, primarily attended by very junior officials. It can't get the traction to deal with the day-to-day race issues of this country. But it has started the ball rolling. It has committed more people to it. I think it is perhaps another area that requires a relook in terms of greater prominence, greater profile, and far greater resourcing. Thanks.
Thank you very much to our panel. I'm going to move to this side of the room, the middle table, and then the table at the back, and that table. I will come back to this side of the room. Please.
I think it's afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Zola Mbeu, and I'm a penultimate year LLB student at Stellenbosch University. My question could be to the whole panel, and this is entirely from a student perspective now. My question is regarding legal education. Mr. Bolton brought up a rise in conservative values. So my question is, do any of you think that this is perpetuated by the way the law is taught? Legal education as it is, I think, is making amazing commercial lawyers, but I don't think it's centering itself around the values of the Constitution that Dr. Kibi spoke about. So do you think the way we are now may be perpetuated by the way legal education is?
Thank you. Proceed.
Good afternoon to all members of the panel and all members of the audience. My name is Sengosi Nugu. I am a third-year LLB student at Stellenbosch University, and my question is to Prof. Lucas Munting. He had mentioned that there's a line that you said that there's a lack of relationship between the NPA, I think you said nationally and then provincially, something along those lines, and but there is some sort of established relationship between the NPA and the SAPS. I'd like you to expand on that point, because I actually do find that point particularly interesting, especially considering the highlighting and that we're reflecting on 30 years of our democracy and our recommitment to fulfilling these particular rights, especially in light of transformative constitutionalism. So I would like to kindly ask if you could expand on it, and if you can provide an example, that would also be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Good day, goeiedag, assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Gary Atzenberg, and I'm the Land and Housing Coordinator for the Nova Park Civic Organization. My question first and foremost is, I just want to know what is the length and time for a murder inquest, seeing there's so many murders in the Nova Park. What is the length and time for a murder inquest? And why does Najwa Peterson and Oscar Pistorius, they get the liberty of, applying for approval for parole, but when murders are actually put out on parole in a Nova Park, they re-offended that, and there's no participation by the community. And last but not least, I want to know the Demon Crazy Alliance Section 126 bylaws, the compliance bylaws. I just want to know, is it constitutional for the city of Cape Town to criminalize pensioners, by the tune of 800,000 rand fine or 20 years imprisonment for just having a spaza shop in the yard, renting out their property for a spaza shop. What is constitutionality in the Section 126 compliance bylaws by the City of Cape Town? Thank you very much, Shukran.
Thank you. I just want to move to that end of the table, the far left. I believe there were some questions there that I didn't get. You may proceed.
Good day. Good day, everybody. I'm Sizo Mandindi from Kailicha. Yes, my group sitting next to me. First of all, I was born here in District 6. I don't like the way that says we black men hate a white man. There's no such. Instead, we were chased away from District 6. My parents were chased away here. Yeah? My dad is one of those SANDF. He was in the war, but he came back. I did bury him in Eastern Cape. I made a claim. It's almost 11 years. I haven't get anything. I've got it here with me. He was paid with a motorbike. The bike, I don't know where it is now, but I need a farm. I don't know when I'm getting it. All right. From there, I went to Guguletu. We moved District C to Guguletu. From there, I went to buy my own place in Kailicha. That's where am I now, at Kailicha. Here in Kailicha, people are being chased away. You go to court, people, you're being told to go to City of Cape Town. You go to City of Cape Town, you're being told, no, we've got shelters for you. You can go and build a shack because you've got no houses for people to stay in. That's amazing. My people are being chased away because if you go to court, the sheriff will come. But now, since the Constitution came up now, at least now the sheriff won't come and chase us. Because they can see now, it says, no, you can't throw somebody on the street. Please, there's no place, so let him stay inside. So, PD, this gentleman is an ad hoc. I wish you could took me to witness stand. You can ask me a lot of questions. Okay, like I said, we are here to say, please, Department of Justice, not the police chase us, because policemen are now being used now by the banks to chase the people away from their houses. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I believe there is a burning question in this middle table. I'm going to take this question and then come back for the next round.
Thank you very much. James Chapman from the Scalabrini Centre of Cape Town. My question is, how do we in practical terms reconcile a South Africa that belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity, reconcile a national action plan against racism, racial intolerance, and xenophobia expressly mentioned, hate legislation protecting against hate speech, hate crimes motivated by xenophobia, with the current situation at the moment, with a rise in anti-migrant movements, with the blatant sort of assault and killing, with incitement from our own leadership, with a situation where we know the facts speak for themselves. 1/3 of the people who are displaced, assaulted, killed are South African nationals from minority groups, minority ethnicities. You see a Venda man who was beaten almost to death because he couldn't speak Zulu properly and he was in KZN. We cannot have this kind of situation. So my question is really in practical, concrete terms. How do we bring to life this preamble, this constitution that says South Africa who belongs to all who live in it in the current context? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. May I ask the panel members for their reflections on this round of questions, please?
I think I'll just comment on the last question. As I said, I think it's an obligation on all of South African government, but particularly the Department of Justice, as the custodian of the Constitution, as the implementing department for the National Action Plan, to have a public profile and a public voice when incidents of xenophobia and racism raise their head. It's not enough to say this is people expressing their will or their frustration, because the frustration isn't with the people who are being victimized, it's with the state's failure to deliver services. And again, if we let it slide, because it's easier to look the other way when the victims are undocumented migrants, then it's going to be easier the next time to look the other way when the victims are gay or lesbian or some other group that doesn't count. That obligation is absolute. And I think, as someone who's been somewhat on the inside, I think the failure to do anything meaningful with the National Action Plan after 6 or 7 years is a disgrace. And it's something that the department should revisit.
Sometime last year, Operation Dudula marched onto the offices of SERI in Joburg. What SERI did, which I don't think many others have been able to do, was to mobilize a counter march of equal or more numbers. And that, I think, at least for the time being, pushed that back. And my view is why a whole new initiative has come, new name, March and new sets of leaders. If you look at the UK, when the right wing marches in towns across the UK, it's not a collective of organizations who put their names to statements, but it's a counter march of far bigger numbers of people who are out in the streets. And I think that that's where the problem that we have is that, at least I know in civil society, our initial response is to pen a statement. We get 100 organizations to put our names. Of that 100, maybe 10 will come out to an actual counter demonstration. And the message that sends then to the rest of society is that this is the cool thing to do. This is what must be supported, because there's no visible opposition to it. And the point I was making, when these sentiments get made at the highest levels of government without adequate censure, it says to everybody else that this is the right kind of behavior. It's tolerated. So I do think that as a country, we have skirted the issue. There is an immigration policy that's up for discussion and debate, but I don't think it's enjoying the kind of detailed public discourse that is in fact required for it.
Perhaps I want to reflect on Zola's question, right, on legal education. I think your answer lies with, when you look at the LPC board exams, there's 5 of them now. When I wrote, there was 4. But there's nothing about the Constitution in those exams. What does that tell you? It tells you we send out attorneys, and we call them admitted attorneys of the High Court, but we test their competency on everything but the Constitution. So to me, that means we give the Constitution less social capital. So then it's not sexy to become a constitutional lawyer. Even at university at this point, if you choose constitutional law as your elective, it's like, you're going for the easy one. There's nothing easy about the Constitution. There's nothing easy about constitutional law. So yes, there needs to be a rethinking of the curriculum. I know they've just rethought it now and just added practice management, but that's not enough. If we are saying the Constitution is our blueprint, then all lawyers must march towards that North Star. DM, if we talk about critics of the Constitution and those who talk about apartheid and colonialism, I saw you frowning when I made that point earlier. We are talking exactly about what Mr. Sizwe from Kailicha is talking about. Social justice will remain an illusion if reparations remain optional. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me deal with the question on the NPA and the provinces. And as the situation stands now, the National Prosecuting Authority is a centralized structure. It's national. And so if we look at the constitutional framework, there's no relationship between the NPA and the provinces. Nothing prevents the prosecuting authority to have an informal relationship or courteous relationship of cooperation, and it happened in this particular province when the late Rodney de Kock was the DPP here. And that seems to have been a productive way to deal with it. But it's not a requirement in law, and that's a problem for me. The second point to it is that Section 206(1) of the Constitution requires the National Minister of Police to develop a national policing plan, and that plan can reflect or incorporate provincial plans and priorities. And those provincial plans and priorities, the police identify in consultation with the provincial government. And I know it because it happened in this province. So you then have a situation where, let's say from the bottom up, the police and the provincial structures, let's say Department of Community Safety, as was known here, cooperate and they identify priorities, and this all feeds up into the National Policing Plan, and I think we would all agree that's a good way to go about it. The NPA is, however, not obliged to align itself with those priorities. It can say, no, I've got different priorities. And I think that creates a constitutional problem for us, and we've not been able to fix it. So that's the tension for me in that situation. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. We have 15 minutes left, so I have to manage time very carefully. I see there's one hand raised right at the left there, and there's so many, if you are brief, so we'll take that table, the one on that left, and one questions here till about for the next 7 minutes, and then we will have to end, because so colleagues. You weren't answered.
They didn't answer my question. The question around Section 126 of the comprehensive bylaws. I just want to know, is it constitutional or unconstitutional? What's practiced by the Demon Crazy Alliance?
Did you get that? I think there was a question about pensioners being punished with huge fines. Is that the question? That's a question. Huge fines when they open the spaza shops. It relates to the bylaws and the implementation of laws. So if anybody in the room has a response to that, would you like to give it a shot? It's a bylaw issue, not necessarily, but I think it relates to the pensioners and livelihood. So I think, sir, the question, maybe I should try and respond. You are talking about the implementation of certain bylaws, and I think the implementation of those bylaws came into play when there was a lot of problems recently with the spaza shops selling illicit goods, contaminated goods, and the number of deaths. In fact, we were just in a meeting the other day, the number of deaths that gave rise to that ministerial committee compared to now. So it's still there. So I think the minister will also deal with it.
No, it's about, like I say, if let's say I'm a pensioner and I have a separate entrance and I take on Somali to have a spaza shop. Now I'm facing a fine of 800,000 or 20 years imprisonment. I just want to know, can we challenge that via the Constitution?
Okay, Minister, will you deal with that question in your speech? Okay, so let me take that table, and first let me take that question, and please be brief so that everyone can have a chance to just ask a quick question. that hand at the corner. I
Oh,
really
sorry.
apologize, but we've got to end the session at 16:30. So let me give
Apologies.
you
Program Director. Hello.
I greet everyone. I will just stress on the eviction, since I'm coming from Khayelitsha. So I would like Minister to help us, because there was a Deputy Minister of Housing, and I think it was 2 months ago, and she told us that the deregistering is started, and the court must hold all the evictions. But they are evicting people. They come with police, and people are out in these rains. So, Minister, can you please help us?
Okay, I will
Thank
allow.
you.
Yes, thank you very much. The Minister will take that question. The question right at the back, because you've had your hand up for quite a while.
Program Director, I've had my hand up for 4 rounds now, and you've been
Yes,
saying
I've
you're coming
noted
back.
you, but he's also had his hand up for a while, so I'm just going to ask his question quickly.
Hi everyone, my name is Oluetu. I'm also with the group of Khayelitsha. So I have some few questions that I just want to ask, and also a statement that I wrote on behalf of people of Khayelitsha who are facing the eviction. So as South African who reflects on the 30 years of constitution, our family who continue to experience emotional and illegal uncertainty housing matters linked to alleged fraud conducting in property of transactions. So it's been for more than 30 years. These houses has been on the issue of the security, part of our family dignities, and despite ongoing illegal process, serious concerns surrounding transactions. So all in all, what I'm trying to say is, we are facing an issue of an evictions, but there were people who were found with the fraud of selling their houses in Khayelitsha. But yet again, people from Khayelitsha are still facing the issue of the eviction. So my question is now, as a constitution, how are you guys helping us when we are facing the issues of evictions? And especially for the younger ones, I see some people are wearing a uniform here. I am the dropout from the varsity. I was doing an electrical engineering at school. My mom, she's 65 years of age. She's having a dementia and depression now because of this issue. So as a constitution, how do you guys help us? Now my dreams are being delayed about this matter. I'm saying all of this for those learners who are here to hear what are we currently facing into the backgrounds who are coming from Khayelitsha. I don't have a father, it's me and my mom, so there's no one who's gonna stand up for us. So you guys as a constitution, how are you standing up? On the 10th of June, I know I'm working at a call center, for an example, while I was trying to chase up my dreams for being someone in life. So my question is now, how are you guys helping us into this matter? So we are trying to provide for our families. I know on the 10th of June, when I'm going to the court, as they are saying that we are being evicted, on that day when I'm at work, I'm not gonna get paid. Thank you so much.
Okay. Can we move on to the next question?
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. But I'll just be very brief. I know I'm tall, but Deputy Minister, when he was addressing, he did mention that we are gathered here not to celebrate, but to reflect on the so-called constitution that is considered the most progressive in the world. And with that, my name is Lee Junatao. I'm a law student here at UWC and the chairperson of Black Lawyers Association Student Chapter. So mine is that when we reflect on the constitution, we ought to check where we come from. And I will tell you where we come from. We come from an oppressive state that excluded a group of people according to race, sex as well, and class. And that is what is happening here today, unfortunately, because when Program Director introduced the speakers, I did not hear Program Director mentioning that there are any young people who are not in university, rather who were unfortunate to not be favored by the system to be in university. So my chat is that if we are going to have such proper conversations without the people who are directly affected, which is the people that are in communities, the youth that is in communities that do not have the opportunity to be in schools, rather would want by all means to be involved in such spaces, then we are not doing the right job. Usually we say that the future of this country lies within the youth. However, I want to change that narrative and say that the future of this country is now, and us as the youth, we are leading this country now already, because if we fail to hold the people that are our elders accountable for what they are doing and the injustices that they are doing, then we ourselves are doing an injustice to our future. So with that being said, is that when we leave here today, following the words of Mahatma Gandhi, where he said that we would judge a country by how it treats its weakest people and not the people that are privileged. What is the task that is given to us as the youth today? That we can go outside and say that indeed we are shaping this country and we are holding the people that are our elders accountable. Thank you.
Are there any other questions on that table? May I take this table, and I'll come back to you last, and you next.
Hello. Greetings to all the leaders. I just have a question. My name is Julian. I am from the LCC River Community Advice Office, but I'm also speaking on behalf of the other advice office in the metro. The question I want to ask is, what happened to the legislation, Legal Practice Act, to formally recognize community paralegals within the justice system? The role of community paralegals is bridging the gap for the poor, disadvantaged communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I take the question in this table?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rowan Lindicke. I'm a fourth-year law student from Stellenbosch University. Mr. Saisi relies on Section 8.2 as a constitutional call on citizens to further social justice, more than we have in the last 30 years. We live in a time where many of the youth are socialized into stubbornness, ignorance, and the narrowification of identity, which is giving rise to the aforementioned conservative values. Therefore, I call on and question what the department is doing with regards to educating the youth in collaboration with the Department of Basic Education so they can recognize and confront the injustices of the past. So those who are born privileged believe and influence their households to believe that South Africa belongs to all who live in it. This should have been the point of departure for nation building 30 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Final table.
Thanks. I'm Tara from Koro People's Perspective. And my one question is that the budget should be reviewed in terms of how constitutionality is being implemented versus the rights versus your political rights. Because we are sitting with a budget that's limiting our rights, and we've often been referred to, there is no budget. So that is one issue that the Constitution is giving power to. Then the next issue is the freely elected representative within the preamble. I think that we should look at this issue because that preamble is giving double standards to me or to us. In terms of our social budget is being invented in a way to support the politicians more than to the rights of the organs of people. And so that's why we're sitting with a high level of unaccountability within this country. Then the next issue in terms of the Dula Umai institution, for the principles that it stood for and it's still standing for, we're not seeing really the effect of the institution within the space. I don't want to say public, but in the community space, because too many cases are being channeled or things are being channeled through the courts instead of being facilitated by communities. And we as the Koro People's Perspective and we the people collectives believe that we should have local problem-solving dialogues, facilitation happening, where the people are more empowered to deal with problems and issues instead of everything is been channeled through a criminal justice system, and that's why we're sitting with all the criminals, and the CPA is actually being generated in a way to ensure that we always have criminals. We don't see the CPA speaking to a position of how do we minimize the issue of criminals. Then the last issue in terms of the Constitution, what has been taken out of context for us is the issue of public engagement, because public doesn't mean the people. It means everyone. It means politicians and everyone. So our voices are being limited through this statement of public engagement instead of community involvement, where communities are empowered to take ownership and responsibility. We are being put in a position, according to these practices, we have been put in a position where we can't do anything for ourselves because there's a law enforcement for everything, instead of the people taking control and implementing certain things, or most of the things we could, because what we find is that because this disempowering position that's been facilitated from the Constitution into your public administration, we're sitting with this gap that a lot of our people are just sitting with their hands out and not able to do a lot of things because we have a system that's facilitating this. And then the last thing is around the issue of that class is being condoned by the Constitution. And class should be addressed in a way that we all are equals, but we are not. Because when we are being listened to, we are listened to from the position of status, and that is something that we need to look at. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Final question?
Hi, good day. You're speaking to Nathan. I'm from the Koi Kotel Youth Development Organization, and I'm also representing We the People and Koro's People's Perspective. So my question to the Constitution is that the wall that they want to build on the N2, does the Constitution support that project in terms of building a wall and spending so much money by hiding our people behind the walls, which will just increase the criminals' mindset, you understand, to override this wall and to do things in a more organized way. So I just wanting to ask, is there any way that the project that they want to run with the wall, that capital that has been spent on that, it could be spent in the community where we have so many youth and young people standing on the corners and have nothing to do, begging on the robots and so many things, and now the government just wants to hide all of us behind a wall. Yes, safety is important, but what is the root cause? Why can't we focus on the root cause of the problem instead of hiding the problem behind high walls? You understand? So that is my question. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have come to the end of the session, and I see there's still a lot of hands going up, but unfortunately, I'm going to have to call the minister to the podium to respond to a lot of the questions. But what came out from this last round in particular is the need for more dialogue with the youth, with communities, and a lot of interesting questions came up on the accountability and budget usage. So I don't mean to cut you short, but we have gotten to 16:30, and definitely there'll be an opportunity. So panel members, unless there's some really burning issue that you want to respond, I thank you for your presence, but please don't leave yet.
Sorry, can I please be the last speaker?
Unfortunately, we've got to call. We'll have a time for dialogue afterwards. I will see you afterwards. And Minister, I'm not going to read your 3-page biography, but Minister Kubai, so she's... I was going to say something before she ran to the stage, but she beat me to it. So Minister, to you.
Honorable Minister, there's a school child that would like to speak to you. I apologize for being disruptive. But there's a school child here that would like to say something. If we can give her a minute or two, we would appreciate that.
A school child. Is it already after school? We must start there. We started at 2. Were you at school first?
No,
you
ma'am.
didn't dodge classes.
There was no school today.
Ellen give them the day off because of the storms.
Oh, okay. No, I'll allow you. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Greetings, everyone. My name is Zoe and I am from Kaya Secondary
Your
School.
mic is not audible from where I'm standing. Okay. Yeah, okay.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Zoe and I am from Kaya Secondary School. As Dr. Zain has mentioned that the aim of the Constitution in South Africa is to create a democratic country where everyone is treated equally and fairly. So now my questions are, how does the Constitution help create peace and unity? And why must everyone obey the Constitution? Like, why is that important? And also, how does the Constitution improve people's life? And how does the Constitution ensure that everyone is treated fairly? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Actually, I was going to give you that challenge to tell me why you think the Constitution is important. While I'm on the podium, before I acknowledge everybody and say, I've got a challenge to young professionals, and I said to them, I want to take them out for lunch. But they've got to do a video, so I'm launching it today, the campaign. They've got to do a 60 seconds video and tell me why the Constitution is important. So watch out on our media platforms. You've got to do that video, 60 seconds, and tell us. It's a campaign I'm running for young women professionals to spend a day, an afternoon, with the Minister of Justice. And it's only for 30 young women. 30 years of the Constitution anniversary and 30 young women that I'm running as a campaign. So watch out on our social media. So you just triggered that as you are asking, because I know you are asking me that. You've got the answers for what you are asking me, but I'm going to try and assist you. Before I say anything, let me start by acknowledging those who are here. Let me give the heads of institutions who are here at least 2 minutes or 3 minutes quickly to say something before I get here. I've got the NDPP, National Director of Public Prosecution, which is for our NPA, Advocate Mutibi. As we were talking about NPA, prosecutors and everything, he's been sitting through in the room listening. So I'm going to ask him to say something. That's the first person I want him to say something.
No, thank you, Minister. Let me acknowledge the Deputy Minister.
I normally
as well.
regard myself as not a BBT, but this one is giving me pro. How do I switch it off? Okay.
Let me also appreciate the members of the panel for the insightful presentations they've made. I would like to start off with the question raised by the student who spoke the last on how is it that the Constitution is really implemented. There's various ways, and I'm sure the Minister also indicated that there's going to be that campaign. But one of those means is that the Constitution provides for the establishment of institutions that would support the implementation of the objectives of the Constitution. One of those institutions is the National Prosecuting Authority. There's been reference to that, Section 179 of the Constitution. If you read it, it enjoins the prosecution in the main to prosecute cases without fear, favor, or prejudice. And then, of course, there's a national legislation giving effect to that. The Prof mentioned that. That legislation is referred to as the National Prosecuting Authority Act. So that is the act that guides our work. Present with me today is the Director of Public Prosecution in the province, Mayor Nicolette Bell. She's sitting there, standing now, you can see her. That's how, amongst others, we've got directors of public prosecution across the country. In all 9 provinces, in Gauteng, we've got 2 directors for how the Gauteng is configured. I mention this deliberately because at the center, as the National Director of Public Prosecution, in the main, the legislation defines our roles and responsibilities. But it is important that the directors of public prosecution in the provinces ensure that prosecutions in the various courts are handled and directed without fear, favor, or prejudice. We are called state prosecutors, but we are also called public prosecutors, and for obvious reasons, that we represent the state, we represent the public. And I'm really interested in the point that was made that in one of the judgments, the court said the prosecutors were a problem. I'll re-engage so that we can see and diagnose what the problem was. But Minister, I would like to really just quickly talk about the issue around the prosecution relation in the provinces, which the Prof indicated. Yes, indeed, it's not in the legislation, as it were, but we do have relations with the South African Police Service and other agencies in the justice, or in the criminal justice cluster in the provinces. We do have relations with the Directorate of Priority Crimes Investigations, called the Hawks, and these relations are enabling us to ensure that we collaborate and ensure that cases that are brought so that we can successfully prosecute. Of late, we are wanting to showcase that we don't just wait for dockets. We engage and participate in the investigations with the police. There is what we call prosecutor-guided investigations. We want to guide the investigations so that when the docket ultimately goes to court, you don't find postponements that really ultimately frustrate victims. So there was a reference to case backlogs. It's one of our stated objectives as the prosecution to also really ensure that we deal with case backlogs generally. I know it was referenced with specific reference to sexual offenses cases, but we have a stated objective in our annual performance plan this year and beyond to ensure that we collaborate with other agencies, including the judiciary, so that we can deal with the case backlogs. Over and above this engagement with the police, there's what we call community prosecution. And that is a concept that really you should watch that space, which enables us to go into the communities and ultimately really listen to the communities and ensure that cases that the communities experience are really brought ultimately into the prosecution space. There is a process, Prof, there's going to be a process to amend the NPA Act, and we have really taken to heart what you've said. Of course, it will ultimately be open to consultations. We would like to ensure that it's amended such that it really, really meets public expectations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, NDPP. Is it fine now? Okay. Thank you very much, NDPP. Unfortunately, because of weather, we don't have other heads here, but I've got, I don't know if you want to say something, Deputy Judge President. She's our chairperson of Legal Aid South Africa. Just comments, and then I'll take over.
Thank you, Minister. Let me stand on the protocol that has already been observed. I sit as the chairperson of the Board of Legal Aid South Africa. With me, I have the Deputy Chairperson of the Board, Advocate Khotso Maja, There's the provincial head for the Western Cape, Ms. Nolita Jali, as well as the head of the local office of Legal Aid South Africa, Mr. Elroy McCallum. There's a question that arose of someone who asked, why Section 35, why are the rights of the accused so well elaborated in the Constitution? That's where Legal Aid South Africa comes in, and that is where one would need to explain that the rights of the accused, protection of the rights of the accused is a cornerstone of what justice is all about. When we come to the protection of the rights of the accused, we should also not forget that when the accused comes before court, because of the past, the ugly past and the history that we had, where in certain instances the rights of the accused were not so respected, we have a constitution that guarantees equality. And we also have to remember that that Section 35 guarantees equality of arms when the accused faces the law. We should remember that when the accused person comes before court, he's facing the police, who are well-trained, who have investigated the matter, the prosecution, who are well-trained, the forensic labs, because the state is armed with so much resources. So we need to balance that for the accused person's rights to be protected in the process. That's the reason Legal Aid South Africa exists. We don't only represent those that are accused of being on the wrong side of the law. We also protect the rights of the landless. We've just taken the mandate from the Department of Land, where we ensure that the rights of those that are landless are protected. We also assist the victims of gender-based violence. We also do civil matters. A number of them, a list is endless. The list is endless. I would not go into detail with that, but if you go into our website and study the legal aid manual, the regulations, as well as the act, you would then understand the amount of work that Legal Aid South Africa is doing out there to change the lives of ordinary people who cannot afford legal representation. Minister, I do not want to take much of your time. I just wanted to clarify, why do we still need protection of the rights of the accused, and the Constitution is structured in that manner? Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the two leadership that spoke, covering that. Let me start first by making the acknowledgement, as DM has helped earlier on, from my side as well, acknowledging the Deputy Judge President of Free State, but who is also a chairperson of Legal Aid South Africa, Judge Mbele, Deputy Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development, Andre Snell, National Director of Public Prosecutions, and Dimutibi. It's nice to come at this point because we already have seen the people. Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee of Justice and Constitutional Development, that's where we account as the department, Honorable Xola Nqola. Members of the Portfolio Committee, member who is here, Honorable Matafa. Member of the Western Cape Legislature, Honorable Nkondlo. CFO of SIU, Mr. Andre Hernand, who is representing the head of SIU, who couldn't be with us, is actually out of the country. I note that the weather as well made it difficult for the Deputy Public Protector to be here. He had initially confirmed, together with some of the leadership from the Human Rights Commission, acknowledging the Deputy Chairperson of Legal Aid South Africa, but I do know that we've got provincial heads who are with us, the representatives of our departments and all the other colleagues, but also most importantly, let me acknowledge and appreciate your participation as the panel. I want to say we appreciate it. We make this approach, and I think people might ask themselves first, why do ministers speak last and not speak at the beginning? Because on my stakeholder engagements, I've taken a decision to be the listener. So I come as part of responding to the issues that are coming. So DM does the opening at front, leading quite well, very well, explaining why we are here. It's a standard approach that we do. And I do find it working because we are here to listen. It's a stakeholder engagement for us to get feedback about our programs, our work, but also suggestion about what needs to happen. What are the areas of improvement that we need to focus on? And today, I was hoping that a number of you will also focus on the budget, but I'm disappointed. And I hope you will take time to look at the budget, because the budget is a commitment from the Minister of Justice to say this is what we will do for this financial year. It allocates the amounts, so it's what the programs are going to be, what the commitments are, but also how much we've allocated there. And that helps because when we come back, you can hold us accountable to say, but this is what your budget vote said last year. And when we look at the report, you have failed, or tell us how far you've gone, Minister, because that's what is important. And I do believe that if we are to lead and to fulfill the vision and the dreams of our forebears, ours is to be transparent in our work, and most importantly, to be accountable. We should be accountable to the public because, and somebody said this preamble means nothing, it does mean something, because I wouldn't exist as a minister without your mandate. I am accountable to you as citizens, and I must take mandate from you, because this is a government of the people, by the people. Whether at some point there are flaws that happens, there are weaknesses that happens, and people feel disgruntled. And that's why these platforms are important for us to be able to reflect on the journey that we have traveled and what needs to be done and how we should be able to do those things. So it's quite important, and that's why I like the quote by Nkwame Nkrumah, who says, for those who judge us will do well to evaluate from the depth of the journey where we come from. So I'm not saying it directly, but it's about evaluating us from where we come from to be able to see whether we've traveled a journey to reach where we are. So it's the depth of where we come from to be able to say, yes, are we making progress or are we not making progress? But I do believe, as the panel members have said, we are making progress. Because leadership is about accountability, leadership is about responsibility, but also leadership is about listening to the people and hearing the issues that are coming out. I think fundamentally when we look, I think from the first panel member, I want to say the reflection of Dula Omar as the first Minister of Justice and what the work had to be done at that time. Establishing a Department of Justice from a very fragmented system where you did not have one South Africa. You had many parts of South Africa. The justice system was developed in such a manner that when we look at black people where they were meant to be serviced, the Bantustans, that justice system was not meant to stand for them, but was a weapon and institution of oppression. And that's the depth where we come from. To have been, as an organization and as a department, to have traveled this journey, to have built a unified judiciary, working together with the judiciary, the independence, but the systems and organizations that we have today. And the issue that is reflected, so I'm going to also try and respond to some of the issues that has been reflected, but others, I take them as lessons for us to go and look at and say, what is it that we need to do? We're sitting here, the reflection is that we've got corruption that is rife, murders that have increased, governance that has declined. Corruption, yes, has increased. But what we need to say is that, are we doing something? Are we seeing green shoots in addressing corruption? I do believe that we are. And I compare this with many countries, and I'll make this example. Last year, December, I was chairing a panel that was interviewing candidates for the position of NDPP. Unfortunately, we couldn't come up with anyone. We eventually ended up appointing Advocate Mutibi. And I think that's what the reflection was, that the powers of the president to appoint alone. But when we did that, because we participate in many platforms globally, many of the colleagues were telling me, Minister, this will never happen in my country. And for me, that's what we need to start appreciating about the democracy we have and about what this government is doing. Similarly, even if an NPA, NDPP, DNDPPs, and everybody else is appointed by the president, but the president can't wake up and fire them. It doesn't happen. For a president to wake up and say, Mutibi, I don't want you, he has to do a fitness to hold office inquiry and appoint a panel that will do that process. So as much as there's a weakness in the appointment, but the tightness in terms of firing, which is the weakness, which is a risk more than even the appointment, it's quite tight compared to many democracies globally. And I must say up front, and I know sometimes I become unpopular, it's not my favorite, because it's a 50 million bill. I was saying to somebody, I said, you know, there's one inquiry that we are doing currently. You look at the amount of money that we, and I was asking, is this necessary? I know, I come from where I come from, so, and because my team knows and everybody that works, I'm not a very patient person, so I don't want things that take forever to finish. I want to see something, I want to see results. So I say, but is this necessary? This inquiry has been going on forever. And this is just a DC matter. Is this what we should be doing? I guess at the time we come for amendments of the legislation, I'll have to come back, Prof, to come and consult and say, and I think both of you raised, Dr. Gimi as well, raised the issues to say, how do we find a balance? How do we get to the middle? Because the extremes don't help as well. Because if you find, let's say, for example, we're sitting today, we're looking at the Madlanga Commission. And we must say they're doing a fantastic job. And out of that fantastic job, sometimes people forget, it's lessons learned out of the Zondo Commission that led to the improvement of the Madlanga Commission. Because we had to sit down and look, what were the weaknesses in the terms of references? How do we ensure that there's efficiency? How do we ensure that we work better? The other time somebody, Chair, when I appeared in the committee, they said, I said, there's no money for Madlanga Commission. Actually, we have underspent from the initial allocation. We're given about 147. By the time that that commission came to an end, with that time, we were below the amount that we did. So, compared to previous, so you can see clearly that there are lessons that we have learned. And that's why there's work that is being done. If you look at it even now, there's compelling of the commission to account, to report, not to end, to wait until the end. Even now, when the extension was given, they were given an extension to say you shall produce a second interim report with recommendations. Because the understanding was that there's huge deficiencies and difficulties that needs to be dealt with. And as they are fact-finding, they must assist us to be able to deal with it. Similarly, when the first report came out, the president accepted the report and said to NPA and SAPS, I want action. I'm not going to wait forever. You are going to start looking at this report and starting to see if you can implement. And that's the birth of the task team that is led by the National Commissioner of Police and the National Director of Public Prosecution. These things did not happen out of an osmosis. These things have been happening deliberately because the leadership has taken a decision that we draw a line on the sand. It's about the country, it's about the flag. We've got to protect South Africa, and led by the president. And that's why we are seeing these developments. That's why we are seeing this. It's painful to sit and watch TV and get to the reality of what has been happening, and you ask yourself, can I walk and trust a police officer when I go work to the police station? But I do believe there are men and women in blue that are still loyal to the flag, that are doing their best. And this process is helping to remove those weeds that needs to be out so that our green can flourish better. And that's what is happening. So we are dealing with issues of crime. We are dealing with issues of corruption. And this is a necessary step for us to be able to, and we are happy that we got to here where we get to really understand the root cause of why we've not making progress on issues that we should have made progress, and they are being dealt with. So it is quite commendable in the work that is being done. It is quite commendable in the areas of intervention and the results that we are seeing in terms of intervention and fighting crime and corruption. One of the issues when you look at the speech I was giving today, you would see that we have taken a decision to say we are going to utilize asset forfeiture and SIU to be able to take the proceeds of crime from the criminals, because what we have learned is that they steal from government and then they take the money to fight government with. So we're saying as a strategy front is asset forfeiture. Strive them of the assets and the money to be able to fight back so that we can be able to reclaim the country. So when you look at that speech, you'll see this area is emphasized and our targets and what we want to do. So that's what we are committing to the country for this financial year under these two institutions that we are working with. In that concept as well, you'd see that we are committing in the budget the issue of the amendment of the legislation for both SIU so that they can be financially viable and sustainable. It's there in the speech. Also of NPA, to giving them their operational and financial independence is committed as in terms of legislative program for this financial year. But also on top of that, I hope you remember, on the 14th, which is a day after tomorrow, it's the closing date for submission for whistleblower protected, we call it Protected Disclosure Bill. This is a legislation that we've issued. I do think that it goes quite a long way in terms of protection of whistleblowers in the country, one of its first kind, where we literally in that legislation, if you look at it, we put time frames to say if a whistleblower comes to minister has 10 days to act after receiving a protected disclosure. But not only that, we are also saying to the whistleblower, when you come forward and work is being evaluated in that, you have a right, we will protect you against dismissals. We will ensure that the state is not utilized to fight back. So issues of previously where whistleblowers would be taken to court and they will have to use the money out of their pockets. Many of them who ended up with nothing, their houses being taken, their cars being repossessed, and losing even just a livelihood. The Protected Disclosure Bill promises a different approach, and that's why we are looking forward to it being supported. I was saying to members of parliament, when we introduce the bill, we hope that all parties will support that legislation so that we can be able to deal with, including the issue of protection. When we talk about protection, witness protection, currently we have only witness protection. We are extending that witness protection under NPA to have a mandate to protect whistleblowers so that we don't have whistleblowers being killed going forward. And one of the issues as I engaged publicly, people said, Minister, this will go a long way. Somebody said to me in one of the panel discussions, said, you know, if this legislation was introduced 5 years ago, I would not have left the country. But just a few weeks ago, I was in a panel again in a discussion with one lady who lost everything and went back to stay in a back room in Soweto. It's an executive, top executive in an organization, lost everything. And she was saying, Minister, even now I'm still in court. I need your help. I'm paying legal fees fighting for my survival. And I was saying to the team, please get hold of the person so that we can see where we best help. But the issue that I'm confronted with is that, yes, we have this legislation that we are going forward, but those that are backward, that have lost, others are calling for reparations to say, is there anything that we can do for the reparation, especially victims of state capture? Quite a number of them, literally, others, majority ran out of the country when they were hounded down in organizations, in departments, and literally those also who testified at the Zondo Commission received no protection. So we're dealing with that as well as part of fighting crime and corruption. Tangibly and clearly, we're very clear, succinct. It's not things that we're still thinking about. As I'm saying, the legislation is out there for you to make comments, to see where it's got weaknesses, but quite a number of people actually have given it a thumbs up to say, actually it raises and it addresses quite a number of issues that we should be able to address. And we do believe that that will go a long way in fighting corruption in the country. Now, coming to the issues raised by Tembale too, the Constitution promises that along the side of political rights, there will be socio-economic rights. So many of you here talks about the right to shelter. I'm not so sure, is it because I come from human settlements that I found quite a number of people. Somebody was saying second floor down, they were still there. There are a group of people that I found that I know. But we've done quite a lot of work, and I know the difficulties in Western Cape in terms of shelter. But the Constitution does promise that. Currently, in terms of law, government, especially local government, has an obligation to provide for an alternative accommodation when there's an eviction. That's a court order. I know there is PI Act amendments that are currently being consulted, but it's not yet the law. So the current law stays where government has to provide an alternative. But I would like to get the details. There's somebody who spoke about a specific case. They're going to court on the 10th of June. Would like to see how best we assist. What is the case about in terms of the evictions, where it is. But again, colleagues, and members of, and our partners and members of civil society, we cannot promote lawlessness. While we are talking about socio-economic rights, similarly, lawlessness does not assist. That's why the rights in the Constitution have limitations. And also, they give in terms of responsibility. But as I say, I am aware of some of the challenges. As Tembeletu said, we were in, the last time we interacted, I was in human settlements and we were dealing with fires in the informal settlements. So I do understand we've got to look at it. I remember one of the time we dealt with the issue where you find that courts have been very clear. I remember one of the judges, was it an acting judge who was telling me that he had to deal with a case in the middle of the night, almost hearing the case because a woman with a child in the middle of July was being evicted to the streets. Our courts have been able to protect the most vulnerable in that case. But the Constitution is very clear. Our laws are very clear. We can't. But obviously, we'll have to have the context of those issues. But I'm saying the problem is, if we look at the Grootboom case, the Grootboom case in the Constitutional Court talks about the government having an obligation to provide for shelter in a progressive manner. So it also gives in terms of affordability, but that obligation remains. So we'll have to look into that specifically. But I do believe that that is the issue. But most of the time, when we talk about the issue of social justice as well, it's a challenge in our country. And that's why sometimes we find people are not able to link the constitution and see benefits because they compare it with their lived experiences. So when we look at the Human Science Research Council, I think when we launched the 30th anniversary at the in Johannesburg Apartheid Museum, I made reference to that research work, where they've gone out into communities and asked them, what does this democracy mean? So people projected the benefits of democracy and the constitution on the basis of their lived experience, whether it's young, it's old, it's rural, it's urban, queer communities, everybody looked at what they went through and they translated that to either giving meaning to the constitution as positive or negative. Kwakwa community spoke about corruption depriving them of services, basic services. A young person in Soweto, in Orlando, who was they were interviewed, they spoke about lack of economic opportunities and jobs. So they did interviews across the country. In Limpopo, they went to the rural, most rural areas. In the urban areas, your township as well, and mixed communities. Each and every, when you listen to senior citizens as well, they almost reflected on viewing the value system in our society being eroded and therefore losing meaning, and almost blaming democracy to the loss of meaning of values, the value system, and the respect that young people must give to older people. So we look at that, and the issue of the constitution is translated into lived realities. But our forebears could do what they have put in front of us. And again, I think one of the speakers here says, it's a young person, we must not have a top to bottom. I can confirm when the constitution was developed, it was bottom to top. Yes. I don't know where were you. It was town hall meetings. Town hall meetings were held across the country. Town hall meetings were held. I have pictures as Minister of Justice because we're celebrating 30 years. So they are, even in the most rural areas, meetings were held. And it was consultative. If you look, as I said, you look at the video that I'm doing, you'll see the people at the back, it's the assembly. If you look at the video that the team will be loading today of the 60 seconds videos requested, when you look at where I'm sitting at my back, is the assembly, the National Assembly, the representatives that were going across the country to consult. It was political activists, it was those that were already in government at that time. So even I make an example, I laugh about it because when you look at the names, they will put a name and they will say freedom fighter. And then they will put a name, they will say a parliamentarian. So you would see there, in terms of liberation movements, those who represented traditional leaders, those who represent, so it was an assembly, it was consulted in communities. We might not agree today, but the fact remains, it was consulted across the country. And the reason why, let me tell you why, maybe there would be a disjuncture between us and those that wrote the Constitution, is because they were coming from a situation where there were no rights at all. Nothing. And a colleague says there is no way those people were angry. No. Even if you go back and look at their stories when they are interviewed, they emphasized the importance of treating each other as human beings. By the way, sometimes we have this notion that people who were freedom fighters were only black. It's not true. We had all races. For example, in the party I come from, That's why you had UDF, you had whites, you had Indians, you had colors in the African National Congress as a liberation movement. So it's not correct to conceptualize it that it was the freedom that was fought for by only black people. Nor that this class of people were very angry, therefore they would have wanted to have an... No, it's not true. You listen to the leaders at that time. They emphasize the respect of human being, and that's why you can see the Bill of Rights, they are in the manner that they are. They understood that we needed, in order to build one nation, in order to build the South Africa that belongs to all of us, we had to heal the divisions of the past. And it meant, when it's healing, is acknowledging of each other as human beings and treating each other as human beings. It was never about revenge. And that's what we need to understand. They took a conscious decision to build a non-racial society. We might disagree with it. It's our right as a generation. But they had a reason. And because as well, during apartheid time, and I'm coming to the point about the rights of prisoners, because maybe others are saying, because maybe they experienced the worst. They were detained without rights. You listen to quite a number of them. You would stay there without trial. You would be arrested, picked up without having access to the children. That's why you can see in the Bill of Rights, it emphasizes that when you are arrested, your family must have come to visit you, because it was the lived experience. It was their lived experience that they would be arrested. They would not have access to their children. You leave a child at 2 years, you come back, it's 16 years, you've never seen this child since then. Now, that's why you'd have those rights. We can falter them and say it was not, but I do believe at that time, they believed they were doing the right thing. And that's why our theme says, you saw our theme, what it says. It says reflect, renew, and recommit. So reflection is part of what we need to understand. What happened? What would have been the thinking? And many of us I heard here, we are students, and research about it. There's quite a lot of material around that time that is available even online, whether it's audios, whether it's this issue. So it's a journey that we've got to travel. We've got to reflect on, we've got to rebuild, and we've got to try and make sure that we don't create a society that will regret tomorrow. And I say this, I'll come to the issues about xenophobic, hate crimes, all these things that are happening in our society. And I think it's a quite correct reflection to say we should have been more vocal. And I'm the first one to acknowledge, as the Department of Justice, we've not been vocal. Because the attacks on foreign nationals, it's incorrect. Because it's a blanket attack. Our country does not have a law or policy that says it's depriving foreign nationals to be here. But equally, as citizens, we don't have law powers to enforce the law. They are law enforcement agencies. So it's both ways. Law enforcement agencies must do their work in terms of those who are illegal in the country and are committing crimes, for example. But those who are legal here can't be made to feel that they shouldn't be here. Whereas when the democracy has not been fought by us alone, we were supported, especially by the African continent. But similarly, when you talk to many people, they still find opportunities on the continent. Our companies are operating in many countries, are actually generating income that comes back here. The trucks that are coming out of South Africa with our gold, with our minerals, going through trucking towards your Mozambique and the continent, it's our benefit. And I remember one time discussing this with someone, I was raising it, I said, You know, for many of us, maybe if we can start even tracing our origins, we'll have a problem. Because maybe somebody has seen in social media, there's a Honorable Kubai in Ugandan parliament. And when you go and look at the person who was arrested with Kenyatta Senior was a Kubai in Kenya. And I remember one time I was with my advisor, Lufuno, here, we were in UN, and somebody approached me and spoke in Kenyan language, indigenous language. I couldn't understand. He said, no, I saw your surname, and you look exactly like Kenyan. Are you not Kenyan? I said, no, I'm South African. So I'm assuming that if I'm walking in the street, possibly I will be asked for my identity. But worse, in the process, you know, there's one video I saw, I'm Shangan Mutsonga. One video where people were singing Shangani Deda, so meaning Shangani move out of the way, get out of our country. Now, where am I supposed to be? Because this is my country of birth. Now, the danger of what is happening is that it will not move from nationality or foreign nationals, it will move to ethnicity. It's a very dangerous thing. But the issue is that we've got to educate our population to stop taking the law into their hands and acknowledge, as a minister, that we should be more vocal. That I take responsibility. And I think it's this type of reflections that helps us to remind us of our obligation and our duties. To be able to say yes in terms of law enforcement, those who are here illegal must be taken out, and those who are here legally must be protected by law. Now, I'm one person over time in my portfolios, I've understood the importance of working together with civil society. And I don't see it, and you must be rest assured, I'm not one person that, fortunately God didn't give me an ego, so I don't get easily bruised. But I do believe that working, you know, the person who said we need to work together as government, private sector, civil society, all sectors, was quite visionary, because there's no way you can build a better country as government doing alone. The check and balances of all the stakeholders is important. Civil society remains a critical sector. Maybe it's because when I graduated, my first internship, I did it in an NGO. Perhaps maybe this is my orientation. I was in ICDA led by Isham Kabela in Bramfontein. That's the first, I did my internship as I graduated. And I understand the importance because it grounds you. NGOs are in communities. That's why it's easy to get information from NGOs, but to be able to work with you, to give the voice and explain things that where there's trust deficit, civil society is able to close that gap. So that's why in all the portfolios I've been, I mean, in human settlements, they will tell you, we even had quite a summit of civil society, just to try and see how best we can. And I would like to do the same here, because I do believe that there's a serious role and huge responsibility that we have as government to work with civil society. We don't have to meet in court attacking each other. There's no need. We can sit in the room, agree to disagree. But let's show each other what is best, what is not best. Let's see how best can we, because our interest is the society. So I want to open up to civil society and reach out to say, I'm one minister that would want to work with you. I'm one minister that would want to hear from you. And I would never get irritated by either calls or emails that says, these are the suggestions. And I would, where I'm available, please, it shouldn't be me alone inviting you. Invite me, I will come. As Ahmad Kathrada Foundation said, they invited me, I went. I spent the day with them, I listened to the issues, and we've agreed with the department. There are things that we are doing out of that event, having listened to what they have raised with us and recommended. And at the right time, we'll go back and say, this is what we are doing. So I am willing, I'm open for us to work together, finding solution. Constructive criticism is good, but please just don't attack us for the sake of attacking. We are human beings. We will get hurt. But as well, we can easily get discouraged. And I say this, I was in a church this weekend, and I was telling them that the danger that we don't realize in society is that the more we make public office unattractive as a society, we risk the danger of having public office bearers that can only sing, if I'm able to put it that way. I hope you've heard me. So, we have a duty, all of us, to ensure that public office bearers are not what people who cannot do anything else. They have no other option except to take office bearer, public office bearers, to take this office, because they have no other option. And they have no other skill, nothing. Because the bar is low. Because if we make it unattractive, we will lose professionals. Like today, we are battling as government to recruit professionals for position. Ask me, I'll tell you about it. You will open for a CV. It's either it's the rotation amongst the ones you have within government. But the quality that you want, you don't find it in abundance. You literally have to go and beg people to say, please bring your CV. You would have seen, again, I'm making an example because it's a public process, NDPP process. We opened it, we extended. People will submit, my experience is that people submitted CVs and withdrew them. They will submit after 2 days, somebody will call, Minister, I want to apologize, man. I think I made a mistake, I'm withdrawing my CV. And I asked why. Many of them were saying, public service is destroying careers. Now, that threat is not only with public administration, it's now extending to public office bearers. You will end up with many people saying, no, I think I'm done. I've done my duty to the country, therefore thank you very much. I'm now done, I've studied, I think I have experience, I can go and qualify, I'll open my spaza shop. That's a risk to our country. And that's why we've got to work together. Where things are happening correctly, let's support that. Where wrong things are happening, let's speak out. It's correct to speak out. It's correct to ask for accountability. And we must never shield. Accountability is important, and we must have everybody accounting. But the problem, I think there was an issue raised here. Prof. Lucas Martin, who was talking about the ministers of today. And the problem, Prof, is that sometimes there's generalization, as if all of us are the same. I pride myself. I have 20 years of being a public rep in my age. 3 years in local government. On the 6th of May, it was 17 years in National Assembly. And I've 9 years as a minister. And I can confidently say I have no scandal. I'm not corrupt. I've never been accused of being corrupt. Now, the part of where it's painful is when you are clapped. You are sitting there, you are doing your best, and as you stand and somebody says, no, they are corrupt. No, I'm not going to speak about everybody else. I'm talking about myself. 20 years as a public representative. 3 years as a councillor in the city of Johannesburg. That BRT, when it started, I was part of that system. I was the chair of the of transport. I came to Parliament, there's nothing I've done. I always say to them, there's nothing I've done in Parliament. And today, I'm minister with 9 years of experience. I've been minister for 9 years. On the 31st of March, 2026, it was exactly 9 years. I became a minister when my son was 2 months. So I was told, leave maternity leave, there's nothing like that in politics. I came back to work, I was minister. I've been in 6 departments. Now, I'm making this because it's important, colleagues, to understand that criticism is correct. Asking for accountability, I'm one that loves accountability. And I'm going to ask the CFO to tell us how much we've spent here, because I don't want you to go out of here without assuring us, no, they know me, I do the same. I am like that. If you look at all my imbizo are in community halls. With the weather and everything, I was told we needed to be here. We can't be in a community hall. So sometimes, yes, the administration gets to make sure that you toe the line as well. But accountability is important. And that's what we commit to. I can say that for myself and DM here, as the political heads of this portfolio. One day I was in portfolio committee and somebody was making a comment that there's political interference. I said, Chair, let's wait. I'm the political head here. I can tell you I'm not interfering in NPA. Can that member clarify? And it's not a mistake, it's a decision. It's a conscious decision that there must be proper governance systems and proper government processes. The DPP will tell you, I never call her. If I need reports, I go to the NDPP. That's my process. That's my protocol. If the NDPP comes with a DPP, that's his process. And it's very clear accountability. I don't even ask them, what are you investigating? No, it's none of my business. Actually, I don't even want to know. Because I want to sleep better. I don't want to worry that, hey, they have told me about some skebengo and that skebengo is coming after me. No, I want to sleep. But the issue here, and there are threats that exist by perception. And one day we'll have a time permitting just to talk about the burden of public office. Judge Mbele here can tell you. Even for judges themselves as presiding officers. We never think about it. Prosecutors, sometimes they get to have to protect. I remember one time I went to one court, I found one of the prosecutors with men standing. I said, what is happening? They said he's dealing with high-profile case. I said, guys, but this person who's coming here, the accused is going to see them in their face. Does it help? You would know about the prosecutors that we lost. Since I've been here, we've lost 2 prosecutors killed. It's the burden of deciding to be in public office. It has its risk. I don't want to share that today, but one day we'll do. Now, so the conduct that is required, I agree, of conduct that is required of public office bearers is of ethical leadership, accountable leadership, leadership that does issues in a transparent manner. In that way, I do believe that it even helps because it builds society that we need to do. But there are a lot of issues that we still have to deal with. The journey continues. We are trying to eradicate what was infrastructure, what was built in 350 years. It's 32 years. We shouldn't tire walking. Actually, the saying that says, if you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. But just don't stop moving. It's what we've got to do as South Africans. We can't stop developing our country. We can't stop building our country. We can't stop trying to deal with the inefficiencies in our system. We can't stop dealing with the corruption, the rotten issues. We've got to continue to deal with them. Those who are biblical will know. One time I said to my team, when Madlanga Commission started, I said, as we get into this journey, my prayer is that there must be just one man who's standing that can give us hope. That in all the sectors, whether it's in police, whether it's in prosecution, whether it's in intelligence, that just says at least we've got something to work for. You would know in the Bible that quote. when Jesus was saying, I just want one man that is of purity, that can do well. And that's what I'm saying. In the justice system, because I also chair the justice cluster. So all the departments, I'm co-chairperson of that system. So I say, in all this process that we work on, and at least as I sit here, I have found men in blue and women in blue who have been fighting in the system against corruption, against wrongdoing. I have found men and women in NPA who have been fighting for our country, for justice. I found men and women in the judiciary. I found men and women in our courts, in departments, that daily fight to ensure that we can build a better South Africa. And all I'm calling for is that let's join those people. Let's join hands. You have a role to play. Our roles are different. You might not be Minister of Justice, but in your corner, in your area, you do have a role to help to build a South Africa that we want. And it's all in our hands. But my appeal, if there's anything else that you didn't hear, I'm saying if you can run, please walk. If you can walk, please crawl. But don't just stop moving in building a better South Africa for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Kubai. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of the program, and I would like to call upon Ms. Nomi Nkonlo to come to the stage to do the closing remarks.
Thank you so. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much to the acting DG, Ms. Pillay. I think as we round up this program, very powerful conversation that also was infused with some of the questions that you have raised. Questions that some of them may not necessarily have been answered, others were, but it is part of the conversation. A conversation with the intention to reflect, as the minister had said, a conversation with the intention to renew and take us back to the project of ensuring that we have a country that all of us, we can be proud to call ours. Standing program director on the protocols that have already been established, allow me to actually greet the Minister of the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, Minister Kubai, with the Deputy Minister, Andrew Snell, the Honorable Chairperson Ngola, and members of the Portfolio Committee that are here this afternoon, evening now, the heads of institutions in the NDPP, the chairperson of the Legal Aid South Africa, the panel members that have actually given us quite a food for thought, listening to the diverse views that you have shared here today, the stakeholders in the House, and the young people that actually ensured that their voice is heard in this particular session. Actually, I'm attending this one for the second time from the last year's one, Minister, which actually it's an interesting journey to form part of using the budget vote engagement to actually reach out to stakeholders to influence and inform the type of work that you are doing. But also, I think, to the stakeholders, I think the challenge has been given to all of us, particularly those who are fortunate to be here in the province, I think we've been told of those that are in the department and some of the institutions that are in the province that we must ensure that beyond that attendance register that was mentioned, that was asking of our ages, I was also very skeptical, and I chose that I'm not going to answer other parts. That's part of the freedom that I have from the Constitution, that I can choose what to answer. When I was very skeptical of many other questions that were there in that attendance register, I decided that I'm going to sign where I think, it's appropriate for me. But I want to say, I think through that attendance register, this gives us an opportunity to network, to engage, and to get to know each other, so that I think some of the stakeholders that are here, we can be able to engage, I think, post this particular session. I must say, I think part of this session, Minister and the Deputy Minister, in a way, uncomplex the Justice Department. Because at most for ordinary people like ourselves, we always believe that when you talk about the Department of Justice, you are only talking about the people wearing those black robes, So sometimes it becomes very intimidating. And sometimes we don't have the legal jargon, we are only ordinary people from Gugulethu. Sometimes even our English is off Bantu, so sometimes we may not necessarily be able to match up. So it's always good to come to a platform where we can just, be ordinary and speak about our lived experiences. And indeed, I think as Mr. Thembaletu said, I think very profound about the tension between the promise and the lived reality. And I think we're all gonna be leaving this room with that particular challenge. A challenge of how do we, in our individual responsibilities, those who are students, studying law, you've got, you're sitting with this particular tension that you must answer as students who tomorrow, you are going to be forming part of very important institutions. How do we ensure that the constitution that we have in South Africa comes very close to the lived realities of the ordinary citizens? And I think this is a challenge of all of us that we must utilize and reflect. And I think civil society, as Minister had said, the challenge continues also to be yours, because you are in communities. You stand in the gap of communities. My constituency office is actually in Witzenberg, in Ceres. They would have loved to be here, but because of this orange level, bad weather that we have, unfortunately, and our roads, some of them that are not good, they could not be here. An area where there is serious evictions, to a point that that particular area has been declared by the Department of Land Reform as a hotspot of evictions with deterrence. And we deal with the challenge of justice there when it comes to, the ESTA law and how evictions are taking place in the most humane way in our country. So I think it is important, and we appreciate, I think, this platform. And I think young people, Minister, have said, speaking about access, how do we utilize technology? How do we ensure that actually technology can reach out to the most remote communities? And I'm sure, as you said, that you are sitting here to listen. I think we're told that we must reimagine the system that we are talking about. That must actually be informed and influenced by the 30 years of our democracy, because from the likes of Dala Omar as the first minister to where we are today, it is important really to say, how do we add our lived experiences to ensure that the vision that is espoused in our constitution, is enriched. And we must understand that the constitution, I think, in what would say in Xhosa, brings imihlambi eyalanayo. It's a very difficult a job through the Constitution to think that it would answer each and everything, that happens. But what the Constitution is about is to lay a foundation that tries to actually take, the highest road, so that it ensures that it brings all stakeholders together in society, those that are extremes in all directions, to ensure that we can be a united and one nation. So as we sit here today, I think we are more enriched as people who have been here. we understand things much more better. Last year, I listened to the NDPP, I listened to Legal Aid that was standing here. I also, as a member of parliament in the province myself, I was very much empowered and educated. That is why I ensured even this time around I'm here, because I am learning new stakeholders that I can actually work with in delivering the mandate, because indeed, it is not for one stakeholder. It doesn't mean that those that are sitting in parliament can actually deliver the society that we want. It is us that is why it is said, a people's government through people's power. And people's power means that you and me who are sitting here today in the different organizations have got a responsibility to ensure that this constitution is a lived reality. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I think that brings us to the end of the engagement. We have a very small token of appreciation for our panel members and a few of our guests. It's a copy of our constitution and a pen, just in case you're wondering if it's something more than that. But very small gifts, just to say thank you very much. So may I ask Ms. Musi to help me hand out those gifts. Thank you. Yes. Thank you very much. Topsy?